you. Of course, credit for this work also goes to our brothers and sisters in labor, and is also made possible by the entrepreneurial spirit of our private and nonprofit centers. We can be proud of what we have accomplished, but there's always much more work to be done. Of course, San Francisco's impact is not confined to our city limits. The Affordable Care Act, Wall Street reform, human rights abroad, and so many other priorities all sprang from the vision, values, and voices of San Franciscans. Because of your trust, I was able to represent our city and our country around the world with patriotism and pride. I say to my colleagues in the House all the time, no matter what title they have bestowed upon me, Speaker, Leader, Whip, there has been no greater honor for me than to stand on the House floor and say, I speak for the people of San Francisco. I have truly loved serving as your voice in Congress, and I've always honored the song of St. Francis, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace, the anthem of our city. That is why I want you, my fellow San Franciscans, to be the first to know. I will not be seeking re-election to Congress. With a grateful heart, I look forward to my final year of service as your proud representative. As we go forward, my message to the city I love is this. San Francisco, know your power. We have made history. We have made progress. We have always led the way. And now we must continue to do so by remaining full participants in our democracy and fighting for the American ideals we hold dear. In doing so, we ensure that our city shines on as a beacon of hope, justice, and peace for the country and for generations to come. After all, San Francisco is the greatest city on earth with the most extraordinary people on earth, and a place that I will always believe is heaven on earth. Thank you, San Francisco, for trusting me to be your voice in Congress. May God bless you. May God bless the United States of America.
Before we had to break, I did want to share this live look with you of San Francisco as we continue to follow that breaking news. Representative Nancy Pelosi announcing that she will not seek re-election next year. We're going to step away for a brief moment, continuing our live coverage after that. Now, day 37 of this government shutdown. President Trump again urging the Senate to end with the ending of the filibuster to get things going. But Senate Majority Leader John Thune says it is not happening. The breaking news this morning is the FAA is now being forced to reduce air traffic levels at 40 key airports beginning tomorrow morning if no deal is reached. Democrats, meanwhile, are riding high after the blue sweep in Tuesday night's elections. But the Trump administration is responding with, the fight has just begun. New York City Mayor-elect Mamdani meeting with Big Apple executives, business executives, as employers and residents are worried about his effect on the economy and obtaining federal money. The president discussing all of this with Brett Baer on Special Report last night. Watch.
I thought that New Jersey would do better. I didn't think that Virginia was going to do very well. Didn't really have my support. The Cuomo situation, it's just, he had too many things against him. I'm so torn because I would like to see the new mayor do well because I love New York. For 1,000 years, communism has not worked. Communism or the concept of communism has not worked. I tend to doubt it's going to work this time.
The point he says, turn the volume up.
So hear me, President Trump, when I say this. To get to any of us, you will have to get through all of us.
How do you respond to that? A very dangerous statement for him to make, actually. He has to be a little bit respectful of Washington, because if he's not, he doesn't have a chance of succeeding. And I want to make him succeed. I want to make the city succeed.
Did you see reaching out to him?
I would say he should reach out to us.
Is there a deal that can be made to end this government shutdown in your mind?
Well, I think the Democrats have become radicalized. I think, this never happened before. They always extend. An extension is very easy. It's done all the time. You extend, sometimes you extend 4 or 5 times. I mean, they become radicalized lunatics, actually, in a true sense. They should automatically extend, and we will make a deal as soon as they do. As soon as they do, we'll make a deal.
Well, we are now watching the impact on the economy, and I want to get your take on this, Mark, because once you've got air traffic cutting a capacity and flight stopping, this really gets to what
Right.
First everybody was upset about tariffs,
Yeah.
all that craziness and hysteria, and now they realize they need that money for the deficit and debt.
And then you realize that the inflation that was supposed to happen in response to tariffs really never happened. I mean, there was a slight one-time price adjustment upward, but that's it. Now, what I'll tell you is that my take on this whole Supreme Court deal is that they're not trying to figure out if Trump can impose tariffs, but how he can impose tariffs. And I said this on this show months and months and months ago. I believe that President Trump and his administration came into Liberation Day with a backup plan already in place. Section 122 will immediately allow them to impose 15% tariffs on every single country for 150 days, and then Congress can vote to continue it. Beyond that, Section 338 will allow him to impose up to 50% tariffs on countries that discriminate against us. Currency manipulation, all those kind of things. So 12 months from today, we're going to be exactly where we are.
Yeah, and on top of that, he's also got Section 301 that he can use for unfair trade practices. Yep. So one of the things that other countries use is having incredibly low environmental standards that they use as an inherent subsidy because we're cleaner, we do it better, we can impose those kinds of tariffs. So he's got plenty of tools at his disposal.
There's also Section 112.
Hello, this is DrPaulCottrell. We are live on Rumble and YouTube. and on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Please help support the work that I do. All these videos are for free. You can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can also be a paid member to my Substack and Patreon channel. All the videos I do are for free. Please help support the work that I do. In addition, you can follow me on X and GETTR, and you can follow me on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. All the links are in the description of this video and all my videos. Share the links, ask your social media to follow me. Please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I have. I have ebooks, supplements, and course material on immunology and pulmonology. If you pay attention to the health protocol that I have, you'll slow down the aging process and boost up your immune system. This is something that I've been developing for decades. If you pay attention to me, I've been doing this since I was 16 years old. I've been learning on how to slow down the aging process. And over the decades, new types of supplements have come on the market and how to stack them, the understanding of aging and sports medicine, and bringing that together to build a protocol that will help the average person slow down the aging process within a reasonable budget. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. One great supplement to boost up that immune system is to take Max 35 or Cleanse. Max 35 is 35 parts per million, and Cleanse is 30 parts per million. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, swish in your mouth, gargle, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and swallow it. What it'll do is boost up your immune system. How? It'll improve your oral cavity health and your oral pharynx, maintain your mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells. Super important. And especially take this during the fall and the winter season. If you or someone around you is not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two a day. Once everything's all clear, then go back to your maintenance dose of a teaspoon a day. I've been doing this for 5.5 years. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right. Let's listen in on Sky News in Mamdani.
Let's go to CNN and watch the host here allows our Mamdani to lie without challenge, to muddy the waters about money for the White House ballroom, which is not taxpayer funded, and money for food stamps, which is.
Clearly see that Donald Trump is threatened by our campaign. He's threatened by it because, like his, we diagnosed the crisis in working class New Yorkers' lives, the cost of living. But unlike him, we're actually going to deliver on that. And that is a contrast that he can't bear to see. Because while he is spending $300 million remodeling a White House ballroom, the same amount of money that could provide SNAP benefits for 100,000 New Yorkers, he's trying to make it harder for Americans across the country to actually afford groceries. And this money that we're talking about, it's money that New York City is owed. It's not Donald Trump's to decide which city or state will get what money. This is the money that New Yorkers are owed, and this is the money that we're going to fight for.
Zoran thinks Donald Trump is scared of him. Just look how terrified the president is. This is him at the American Business Forum in Miami earlier today. Terrified.
I can't stand when these fucking asses, like in these clips, constantly play music because it always causes a copyright strike. It's just bullshit. Just so dumb. They should never fucking play the music.
Dani and the president had this to say about a communist taking over New York City.
But the communists, Marxists, socialists, and globalists had their chance, and they delivered nothing but disaster. And now let's see how a communist does in New York. We're going to see how that works out. And we'll help them. We'll help them. We want New York to be successful.
CJ, Donald Trump actually thinks politically this is a win for Republicans. It might be a whole lot of pain for New Yorkers, though, but it will serve as a warning to other cities and states.
You're exactly right, Rita. And sometimes the most important lessons learned are the hardest ones to learn. And I think that will be the case that New York City has to endure, unfortunately. But I'll tell you this, what we do know historically is that everywhere that communism and socialism has been experimented with, it has failed. It has been a failed experiment. And so I think President Trump is right on his prediction. I think the people of New York City will soon realize just what they bought and paid for here. But I got to tell you, as someone from the South, we don't want them to flee and come down south to escape their problems, especially if they're going to bring their politics with them.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, because we've already got governors like Governor Abbott in Texas very worried about this, but then other governors like DeSantis in Florida, they're rubbing their hands. They're lowering property taxes, pretty much eliminating them, and just making it even more attractive for New Yorkers to flee there.
Yeah, see, my thing about that is, here, if you're going to come, you're a New York Republican who wanted the, low electricity prices, the lower prices overall, but you're a card-carrying Republican, come on down, bring your politics with you, that's fine. My problem is the people who voted for this nonsense, voted for this mess, are going to realize the consequences of their own actions, then will want to flee and get out of town. Because here's the deal about these people. When the going gets tough, these people get going. And where do they get going? To red states. The problem with them is they bring their politics with them. You don't get to be a political refugee and get to turn from the place that you're fleeing to into the place that you fled from.
Now, CJ, we saw almost immediately with Mamdani after he won a switch from that lovable, affable, always smiling, all-inclusive, tolerant, friendly commie to a hardline hectoring commie. The mask slipped almost immediately. Even the lefties on CNN noticed that. And Mamdani started his victory speech by quoting a communist, or a socialist if you want to be generous. And this next statement has plenty of people worried.
We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about.
CJ, what can you say about that? Conservatives did try to warn these dim-witted New Yorkers that were dazzled by promises of free stuff.
We did try to warn them, but again, this is a lesson that is going to have to be learned by the people of New York City, and it's going to be a hard one to learn. It's going to be a painful one to learn, but it's going to be an important one for them to learn. And so I think a lot of people after this election, I hope they learn the definition of what socialism actually is. I hope they learn the history of socialism all throughout the world, because I think if they had known that, the schools had taught that, we wouldn't be where we are right now in the city of New York.
Now, yesterday was a poor day for the Republicans. They lost not only New York City, but they lost in New Jersey, they lost in Virginia, and they lost with really decent margins. I guess New York City you can't count because there wasn't even a Republican option there. What do you see as the main reason behind these poor results?
Well, I would say these states are Democrat states. Virginia hasn't had a Republican win the presidential contest there since 2004. You look at, the state of New Jersey, also a similarly very blue state. I think blue states both like blue states. They have momentum at certain junctures of the race, but you can't really go against those political headwinds, much, right? And so I think that at the end of the day, I think this is a call to action for Republicans to not rest on our laurels as we approach the midterms. They're going to be a lot more favorable to us, and especially as I think President Trump's economic agenda begins to take shape and take effect. We're going to see the lowering of prices across the board. And I think the president's message will be simple. It's about affordability. It's about
the S&P 500 is open, and it's trading at 6,780. VIX is trading at 1850. Euro's trading at 1.15. Oil's trading below $60 a barrel at 59.26. Bitcoin is trading at 102, almost 103,000. Japanese yen's trading at 153.48. Natural gas is trading at 4.28. So S&P 500 is down about 15 points right now.
Living in America down so that everyone can afford the American dream. that's how we're going to ensure that we not only grow our majority in the Senate, but also do so in the House. And so I think that it's a wake-up call for Republicans, but I don't think we should read too much into it. Again, these are Democrat states that voted for Democrats. I'm not surprised at all.
Well, that is a good point. They are Democrat states, and young women are responsible for much of what we saw in Virginia, New Jersey, New York City. They overwhelmingly backed the leftist options, and women in general, CJ, backed people like Abigail Spanberger for governor of Virginia, while most men voted for the Republican woman, Winsome Earl Sears. And we saw in New York City, women and foreign-born voters really get behind Zoran Mamdani.
No, you're exactly right there, Rita. What I would say to that is that I've oftentimes said that white liberal women will be the death of our republic if we don't get serious about, somehow changing their minds about a lot of these issues. And, what I'll tell you is that after the passing of Charlie Kirk, I saw someone point out the fact that we hope that Erica Kirk will be able to do for young women what Charlie Kirk was able to do with young men. And I think that, if she's able to do that, I think that's how we right this ship. That's how we turn the tide to ensure that we can save this country, because it truly is unsettling what we're seeing among that demographic. And it's not too late now, but it may be in a few more election cycles. So you've got to do the work to reach them where they are.
I've got to say, I'm really concerned about how this goes as far as societal changes, because you've got young men increasingly leaning right. You've got young women leaning heavily left, so often radical left. How is that going to work? How are these people going to find lifelong partners and spouses when their values are so fundamentally different? Politics isn't everything, but we're talking about consequential issues here. Now, just quickly on Virginia, they did elect Democrat Abigail Spanberger, and she beat a Republican woman, Winsome Earl Sears. And what was really interesting here was Barack Obama campaigning for Abigail against a black woman after he told black men they were sexist for not backing Kamala. And incredibly, the NCAAP campaigned for that Democrat too. That's the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People, campaigning against a coloured woman.
Well, see, Rita, the thing about these people that it's important to understand is that they don't actually just like black people. They only like black people that they can control, right? And so Winsome Earl Sears was not someone that they could control, so they didn't like her.
O'Connor on the Supreme Court, female, conservative, but the liberals never talk about her. They only talk about someone else, someone that is a female that is a leftist. No, not a conservative. You can never have someone that's breaking the ceiling that's a conservative. No. RGB. It has to be RGB, a super liberal.
You can control Kamala Harris, you can control Michelle Obama, you can control many of those other folks that toe their party line. But Winsome Sears was a independent thinker. She was a free thinker, and that scared them more than anything at all. And so they were willing to go against their own public statements from 2024, willing to go against their own public statements even today, to support Abigail Spanberger, who is really not have a record that is worthy of any type of commendation at all. So again, these people are hypocrites. They expose themselves every single day. And I say this oftentimes, I think, when I'm with you, is that when someone shows who they are, believe them the first time. And the Democrats have shown us time and again who they are. It's the most blatant and unapologetic hypocrites on the face of the earth.
Now, Donald Trump has reaffirmed his commitment to help persecuted Christians in Nigeria. He had this to say earlier today.
Christianity is facing an existential threat in Nigeria. Thousands and thousands of Christians are being killed. Radical Islamists are responsible for this mass slaughter. I am hereby making Nigeria a country of particular concern. That's a legal definition. When the Christians or any such group is slaughtered, like is happening in Nigeria, 3,100 versus 4,476 worldwide. What horrible numbers. Something has to be done. I am asking Congressman Riley Moore, together with Chairman Tom Cole and the House Appropriations Committee, to immediately look into this matter and to report back to me. And I mean, like, immediately. The United States cannot stand by while such atrocities are happening in Nigeria and numerous other countries. It's not only Nigeria, it's all over. We stand ready, willing, and able to save our great Christian population around the world. This is not going to happen. The killing of Christians is not going to happen.
The US will not stand by while such atrocities are happening in Nigeria. You mentioned other parts of Africa. What did you think of that statement from the president, CJ?
I think it's incredible to see, him highlight an issue that for a long time has been ignored by the mainstream media on both the left and the right, to be quite frank with you, right? And so I think that to see him standing up for Christians all around the world, we are a nation that is one nation under God. I think this is a testament to that. There is no reason that you should be, a subject of genocide simply because of your Christian faith in any corner of the world. And I think many people in this country stand with our president in his pursuit of ensuring that people are able to freely express their faith, whatever that may be.
Now, CJ, The Guardian appears to be upset that Donald Trump has threatened.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver soaps. Very high quality, doesn't have all the fancy chemicals that Procter & Gamble are producing in their soaps. These are soaps that I use year-round. Get them as a gift, but especially use them during the fall and the winter season. You'll need them. It's made from structural nano silver. You can get it in charcoal tea tree, lemongrass, also in peppermint and lavender. So get a few bars for your household. You can use them as stocking gifts for the holidays, but especially use them for the fall and the winter season. It is important to boost up your health to mitigate any problems that might arise. All right. Let's listen in to I want to listen to CNBC interviewing the Chicago Fed president.
At Janus Henderson Investors, we believe working together is the way to work better. With your goals and our expertise in perfect harmony.
The Chicago Fed labor market indicator. It's a new thing published. It's out this morning. It's a new report that brings together a lot of different alternative market indicators along with the government data, but we don't have the government data. So this indicator is now filling in for the missing government data with other private sector data. It's confusing. You can read it online, but the bottom line is this. Estimates the unemployment rate most likely unchanged at 4.36% in October, but there's a 40% probability that it's higher according to the model and a 20% probability that it's lower. Joining us now, Austin Gould, the Chicago Fed president and former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors in the Obama administration. Austin, I know what I'm doing this weekend. I'm going to play a little guitar. I'm going to do a little fly fishing. Spend the rest of the time trying to understand all of the alternative jobs data that's out there and just what the heck it's telling me about the market. So we have this morning, Challenger job cuts, one of the worst Octobers since 2003. We had the ADP report, 42,000, that's okay. And I've got this report telling me that the unemployment rate probably unchanged. What's your take on the job market? And good morning.
Well, hello, Steve. I'm going to save you some time this weekend. You just move the Chicago Fed labor market indicators right to the top. You look at it, and you just saved yourself 30 minutes. We have only the private sector information when the government is shut down. That said, when we put together these labor market indicators, it wasn't because of the government shutdown. It was because we wanted more real-time information, and so we supplement by 11 different sources. And to me, most of the labor market indicators that we're getting show a lot of stability in the market. And when we were getting the government data, they showed a lot of stability. The one number that was not showing stability, that showed pretty substantial deterioration, was total payroll job creation. But there's a question mark on that we should be a little careful over indexing on payroll job numbers as an indicator of the business cycle. When immigration, there's a huge question mark, and you don't know what's happening to population growth. So I still think that there's mild cooling, but this labor market indicator reading that we put out from Chicago Fed that shows the unemployment rate is basically unchanged except for a tiny increase that came from the workers who are not working because the government shut down. And that the hiring rate shows a lot of stability, and the layoff and vacancy rate also shows a lot of stability. That's what it feels like on the labor side so far to me.
Okay, there's a different way to look at it, which is not what the numbers say now and what was it before and how the change is, but where the risks lay. And what do you say is in terms of what the downside? Is there greater downside risk to the job market? And how does that compare with your assessment of the risk?
Yeah, I'd say a little, I'd say there's a little more danger. It feels like mild cooling. The hardest thing that is among the hardest things a central bank has to do is to get the timing right when there are moments of transition and try to figure out the through line of what's happening. That's why I still continue to think that there's a lot of stability, and we're in an unusual environment, which is this low hiring, low firing environment. The beginnings of recessions and business cycles are not historically low hiring, low firing. There tends to be low hiring when there's high firing, or when the economy is booming, the reverse. It characterizes periods of high uncertainty when businesses pull back and they have both low hiring and low firing. And when I'm out here in the Midwest talking to business people in the Chicago Fed district, I still hear a lot about that. We don't know what the rules are going to settle down at. We might still get deals on tariffs. We need to figure out where we are before we're going to reach an equilibrium. So I think there's still that uncertainty hanging over us.
Does that uncertainty and that lack of understanding where the equilibrium is make you reluctant to continue the rate cutting cycle that the Fed appeared to be on?
Maybe. I mean, I think there's a subtlety that is asymmetric when you turn off the data like we have. And that is, we have a bunch of indicators from the private sector and from the Chicago labor market indicators, et cetera, about the job market. And we have very little private sector information about inflation. So when the government is shut down, we're not getting the official statistics. If there are problems developing on the inflation side, it's going to be a fair bit of time before we see that. Where if it starts to deteriorate on the job market side, we're going to see that pretty much right away. So that makes me even more uneasy, maybe I'd say, with front-loading rate cuts and counting on the inflation that we have seen in the last 3 months to just be transitory and assume that they're going to go away.
Mr. President, what are Mr. President, what are the indications or the worrying parts of our current situation that would cause us to think that the labor market is softening? And by that I mean, I know we've had tariffs. I'm not sure that's really enough to do it. The uncertainty from tariffs and what that does to businesses, maybe that could play into it to some extent. But you look at earnings and you look at the stock market and you look at things like that, and I'm trying to figure out why we would even be predicting that jobs would be weakening. We could be totally wrong.
Jobs would deteriorate. It's an interesting question, especially when we're getting the GDP numbers coming in as strong as they are. Consumer spending strong, And if growth is that strong,
Look into the abyss. There's nothing there unless maybe AI is putting people out of business or something.
yeah, but look, you could have in the short run, if technology and productivity growth accelerated even more, and it has been pretty high in the last 2 years. If it accelerated even more in the short run, that might replace their need to hire labor, but that really wouldn't be the business cycle. I think it would have to be, you've seen this cooling, the hiring rate is pretty low. That's the weakest part of the job market, and everyone knows that and feels that. If you look at new graduates especially, they're feeling it's hard to get hired in a job. And so the deterioration of the job market, if it weren't sudden, if it were tied to consumer confidence, where you've seen consumer confidence hasn't been that high, maybe it would be rooted in that. But I think there's been a lot of stability in the job market, and the unemployment rate is objectively low, and the layoff rate is objectively very low. Both of those, that would be very unusual for the beginning of a recession.
Hey, Austin, I have tried to make it a practice over the time not to ask Fed officials what they're looking at, because the answer is always everything, except for now we're in a shutdown. So the question of what you're looking at is actually pretty germane here. When it comes to the inflation side, I've been looking at this series price stats. Could you fill us in on what you're doing to kind of get a feel for what's happening? We've a guy, Troy Ludka from SMBC, has been looking at an aggregation of the price data from the Federal Reserve Bank, different manufacturing reports. What are you doing to try to get a feel for inflation out there?
I'm talking to a lot of business people to ask them where do they see it going on both the cost side and the sales price side for their products. Now, I want to caution everybody, it's a lot easier. We don't get very much inflation information
there's some acceleration in the sell-off in the S&P 500. It's trading at 6,756 right now. There's a support level at 6,750. If that breaks, we got a problem.
Official statistics are shut down, and what information we get skews heavily to goods. That physical goods and physical manufacturing it's easier to measure. And the most troubling thing that came out of the inflation reports that we got right before it went dark was that services inflation, the 3-month core services inflation, was pushing 4% at an annualized rate. That's almost certainly not coming from tariffs. We got to hope and historically that's pretty persistent form of inflation. So we got to hope that was a blip. And for it to go dark right at that moment is uncomfortable.
Also, there appears to be good.
I was going to say, I all we can do is rely. Before I was ever at the Fed, I was involved with that Adobe Digital Price Index project. I'm friends with the folks that started the Billion Price Project. What we observe from online and from observation is very limited. It's not near as good as the official statistics.
Okay, so there appear to be two different.
I need too many damn commercials.
Okay, so there appear to be two different ideas about how to drive at the Federal Reserve these days. One idea is if you're driving in the fog, you pull over and stop, and that argues for a pause. The other idea is, well, somebody said, you may slow down, but you don't stop driving. Nobody has mentioned the idea of just getting in a Waymo and letting the computer drive, but that's another story. Tell me what your thought is about how to drive in this fog of data.
Look, you know that on a medium run, I'm not hawkish on rates. I believe that the settling point for rates is going to be a fair bit below where it is today. and that all we got to do is get the dust out of the air and make sure that we're still on path to full employment with prices coming down. That what knocked me for a little bit of a loop is we had this 3-month period right before the data go dark where core inflation is running at 3.6% and core services almost 4%. That's not perfect. You know, if you're Thanksgiving's coming up, you're cooking the turkey. If you open the thing, you look in there like, is it burning? I don't know. Let's cook it for 30 more minutes and see how it does. It's a little, as I say, I have some concerns, and I lean more to the, when it's foggy, let's just be a little careful and slow down. And this subtlety that the data being turned off, the official data being turned off, is more problematic on the inflation side than on the labor side, because if labor starts to go wrong, we're going to get observations that show that. But if inflation starts to go wrong, we're not really going to get observations that show that. That just that accentuates my caution of front-loading rate cuts and just assuming that the inflation that we've seen the last 3 months is going to go away.
Okay.
At Janus Henderson Investors, we believe working together is the way to work better.
We're going to listen to Joe interviewing Mike Johnson about, I think, the shutdown. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator Barley. Gladiator Barley will help to build up muscle. You do resistance training, you take this, they'll help to build the muscle, they'll bring down inflammation, you'll recover quicker from your workout. This will also help to detoxify your body and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. This is pretty powerful stuff. There's a lot of micronutrients in this Gladiator Barley. Take it every day. This is a month's supply. Make sure you do resistance training. And by detoxifying your body and bringing down inflammation on a regular basis, you're boosting up your immune system, helping your endocrine system, helping your vascular system, and you're also helping with your brain function. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator Barley. Make sure you use discount 5. You get $5 off any order.
Up of the government shutdown. Join us now, House Speaker Mike Johnson. Mr. Speaker, it's good to have you on this morning.
Good morning. Not a great day in America because of the shutdown, but I'm always happy to be with you.
Yeah, and happy to be with you. So we had Senator Britt on a little bit earlier talking about some of the efforts from that chamber. I know you're willing to talk and try to get this thing ended, but it's really up to the Senate. What do you think of these ideas of a couple of the appropriations bills that have already passed? You could put it on the clean CR. That was her idea, but I don't think there was an Obamacare subsidy extension being talked about. Would that induce any Democrats to cross over that finally and vote for the CR, those other appropriations?
Well, my dear friend Senator Britt and others doing a great job over there. The Republicans are working hard with a handful of moderate centrist Democrats who are left, who understand the pain that's being inflicted on the American people, and they want a way out of this. The Democrats have painted themselves into a corner, Joe, as we've discussed before, because this really was, as some people say, the Seinfeld shutdown. It's a shutdown about nothing. There was no fight. There was no skirmish between the parties. When we passed back on September 19th, the Clean Continuing Resolution, it was nonpartisan. It was 24 pages in length, bare bones, just to keep the lights on. And this is an important point. The whole reason for that is because the Republicans and the Democrats, who were appropriators, got together and said, we're running out of time to do the normal process, the regular order of funding the government. We need about 7 more weeks. So let's just extend it to November 21, and we'll all get our work done. That was the agreement they made, bipartisan and bicameral. But then Chuck Schumer decided to throw a big wrench in the middle of the machine because he wanted to show a fight against President Trump because he needs political cover against the rising radicals in his party. I mean, that's pure and simple what this is about. So it never really was about any particular issue. It was about the Democrats trying to show a fight. And now they've gotten themselves into the longest shutdown in U.S. history. And it's serious business for serious people.
You think think, the spirit, and let's take some Democrats at face value with what they say. They say that they're really concerned about the expiration of the Obamacare pandemic subsidies. And that you know, if they knew for sure that Republicans would negotiate in good faith after they reopen the government, that if they had assurances even from President Trump, they would do it. That's only about $40 billion. Why do we keep hearing 1.5 trillion? And you know, why would you use the leverage which Democrats have because you need a supermajority? Why would you use it to put all that other stuff in there if all you really wanted was you know, a way to get a year's worth of these subsidies? That's only $40 billion. Would you have agreed? Would Republicans have agreed to that, or not? Not even that would have been okay with Republicans.
What you're highlighting there is the entire point of this. When we say it's a shutdown about nothing, if you polled 100 Democrats between the House and Senate, you get 100 different answers about what this is about. That's the thing. It never was about one particular policy or argument or discussion. We all knew that the COVID era Obamacare subsidy was going to lapse at the end of December. That is the expiration date that the Democrats themselves put on it when they created that big subsidy, okay? We knew that we were going to have to debate and arm wrestle about that through October, November, December. That was always on the calendar. Everybody in the building knew that in both parties. They tried to glob onto that and make that the issue of the day because they think that sells with voters, okay? Yes, the appropriations process is going forward. Yes, we're going to have to talk about healthcare and sort all that out. But when we say the 1.5 trillion, that is the actual counter offer that they put on paper and filed in the Senate. It is still sitting over there as their counter proposal. 1.5 trillion in new spending on a 7-week stopgap funding measure. And it's just madness. And included in that, yes, go read the bill. They want almost $200 billion to be returned to healthcare benefits for illegal aliens. They want to send all these billions of dollars back over to foreign countries for social spending in other countries. They wanted to restore $500 million to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. All these things, and in that proposal, amazingly, shockingly to us, they put it on paper. They want to repeal the $50 billion rural hospital fund that Republicans worked so hard to get signed into law July 4th. So it's just a mishmash of priorities and things that different Democrats are claiming. That illustrates the very point. This was never about one particular issue. They just wanted to show a fight. They wanted to look tough to the Marxist rise in their party. And remember this, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are both New Yorkers, right? We all just saw what happened in New York City. Mamdani is all the rage now, and the young communists are uprising, and that scares the old guard Democrats in Congress. And so they were afraid they'd get a challenge from a Mamdani disciple in their next election cycle.
Mr. Speaker,
that is what all this is about.
You explained it on this show. You explained, I've seen you everywhere, and Senator Thune and everybody else. To this day, though, with a lot of the stuff that I get pushed back on Johnson, they're trying to cut Medicaid. Most people in the country do not know it's about a clean resolution. They think that in this bill that Democrats will not vote for, they think that Republicans are cutting Medicaid and taking away Obamacare from people. So that somehow that has not reached most people at this point, and you saw the results of the election. Now, they were blue states, no doubt, but in New Jersey, it was a much bigger margin than people thought that Cottrell lost by. Virginia, even the Attorney General, even that guy was able to get it. So something about the shutdown, it's not getting out from Republicans, because the narrative from the left is that your meanies, they're going to take healthcare away.
Well, they're suggesting that's going to happen later, not necessarily as part of this, but they're trying to use it. Well, it's not going to happen. No,
it's a clean CR.
Look, there's a lot of false narratives. It is a clean CR. It is exactly what they had already voted for. And literally, Chuck Schumer led the 10 Democrats in the Senate to vote for this same product back in March. But that's when he took all the abuse from the radical left. And he made a decision back then. I don't care what. I'm never going to do the right thing again. I'm not going to keep the government open. I'll go down on that hill because he knows his career's over if he doesn't. I mean, really, that's what this is about. The clean CR, guys, is Biden-era policies and spending. It's not Republican priorities. We don't even like this stuff. But we were trying to operate in good faith to keep the lights on. There's so many false narratives about this. Yes, I'm not surprised that people are misled because the entire mainstream media is out every day parroting the talking points of Chuck Schumer. I have to go do a press conference every morning just to try to put the truth out there, the simple truth that is not changing. It sounds repetitive to us.
Not from 6 to 9 here.
Saturate.
Not from 6 to 9 here, Mr. Ricker. We're not carrying.
I know.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to ask you.
That's why I appreciate your show.
Come on.
I wanted to ask you something different, which is just a comment on what we heard yesterday at the Supreme Court, because a number of the justices, including conservative ones, Justice Gorsuch and others, raising questions to the Trump administration about the tariffs, and specifically asked at one point whether there were any guardrails that would prevent Congress from, quote, just abdicating all responsibility to regulate foreign commerce, for that matter, declare war to the president, effectively asking whether the president has too much power and whether Congress is effectively abdicating its power in this context.
Yes, look, I followed as much as I could in a busy day yesterday. That was what I used to do. I was a constitutional law litigator. I had lots of those oral arguments. I would not read too much into the justices' questions. I mean, that's kind of part of the process. It's to be expected. The vigorous judicial review is what you expect at the Supreme Court, and so they ask probing questions, and it's almost never indicative of how they'll come out in the end. I'm cheering for the president that the executive will win on this. Now, I say that as a jealous guardian of the legislative branch of government, Article 1. There's a reason we're listed first in the Constitution. This is supposed to be the place of greatest importance. We're the ones that are supposed to make the law and the policy, but we do give the executive traditionally a lot of leeway, a lot of discretion over international trade. And we had a serious problem in this country for decades. As you all know, and you've discussed many times, we had a big trade disparity. The president stepped in. I think he's used that authority appropriately. He's obviously created a lot of leverage for our trade strategy internationally, and it's yielded great results. And so I'm watching that carefully because I'm the guardian of the Article 1 branch of government. But I think he's well within the lines, and I hope that a majority of the justices agree, because if they reverse all this, it would really be chaos in the markets and in the economy. It'd be a real problem for the country.
And that's a point that Justice Amy Coney Barrett actually asked about yesterday during the case, about what kind of, quote, mess this could create. But let me ask you a question that she also asked of the Trump administration. She said, this is about effectively the law they're using to do this currently that was in place in 1977 by Congress. You're asking us to read, quote, regulate importation, which is the phrase in that law, as a blank check. If that's what Congress meant, why didn't it say so? What do you think?
Well, I think Amy's a brilliant jurist, and I've known her since high school back in Louisiana, and I'm not surprised she asked good questions. I think the response there was appropriate. I didn't hear all the oral argument, but I know what the analysis and the rationale of the White House is, and they believe they're using the appropriate authority under law. I do as well. And I would tell you, I mean, Andrew, if I thought that the executive was overstepping its bounds, I would have spoken up. Now, I do it in my way. I would do it behind the scenes with the president. We work that out privately, not in a public dispute. But I really do think they're within the bounds, and I'd love to talk to my old friend Amy about that and try to sell her on my view. I wish I could have argued that case. I would have enjoyed that one.
Mr. Speaker, this has got me thinking all kinds of different things, and a lot of the scenarios are quite horrific. And I'm talking about the filibuster, and the senators are pushing back on what the president wants to do there. But then I think about it, and he is right about one thing. If the Democrats have a majority without Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, they will get rid of the filibuster, and that would open up the floodgates for God knows what. Gun control with 51 votes for gun control, for climate change, for whatever. So it seems like there's nothing to do with tariffs right now, but it seems like an absolutely horrific outcome if it were to happen. Is it going to survive? It seems like its days are numbered. It's been around since 1917. Do you think it should survive? Or because the president's pushing for Republicans to end it?
When the sawdust settles and the engine finally roars, the thing you care about most is to
end it.
Well, I'm delighted that of all the things I have to say my prayers about in the morning, it ain't the filibuster, because that's a Senate thing, not a House thing. But I'll tell you what our Senate Republican colleagues say. Some of the most conservative, some of the most thoughtful people, is that they jealously guard that as a speed bump, right? Because you're right. If the Democrats were ever able to govern with unified government, White House, Senate, and House without the filibuster, you would get the Supreme Court would be packed with 13 or 15 justices. They'd make, Puerto Rico, DC states. You're right. Second Amendment would be infringed immediately. You'd have all sorts of chaos. They'd nationalize the elections, abortion on demand, just go down the list. So the filibuster has been a very important safeguard, a bulwark against the Democrats' worst impulses. The big question is, and you're right, the president's convinced the Democrats would do it next time if they ever had the opportunity. I'm a little more skeptical about that. I mean, this is my view. It doesn't matter. I don't get a vote on this. But when Manchin and Sinema held them back last time, I believe, I'm told, and I believe it's true, that there was a group of moderate Democrats who voted yes and prayed no. In other words, they let Sinema and Manchin take the arrows and be the sacrificial lambs because they wanted to look tough to the base. But they certainly prayed that it would not be the case because they're afraid what we would do without any speed bumps, So, I mean, it's been an important part of the institution. That's what the Senate, the Republicans and the Democrat senators have argued in the past. And the founders, when they set up the Constitution, remember, they wanted the Senate to be the cooling saucer. That's how it was described, right? The House would be hot and emotional and everything would fly over there, and then it would rest and they would have deliberate debate, very thoughtful conversation, more time would go by, and that would prevent our worst impulses. I'll just say this last thought. If the filibuster's gone, and maybe its time has come, they have to decide that, but if it's gone, you're gonna have massive whiplash after every election, every presidential election. Anytime a new team comes in, it would be a lot of instability, and I don't think that's great for the markets or the economy or anything else.
Mr. Speaker, before we let you go, there's a story we've been talking about all morning. Wanted to get your thoughts on it. NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang was quoted in the Financial Times this morning saying that China will win the AI race. He was effectively making the argument that some of NVIDIA's most advanced chips effectively should be sold in China. Otherwise, they're going to run away with it, given some of the things they're already doing. He's since softened some of those comments online. But how do you think about whether NVIDIA and some of the American companies making the most advanced chips should be exporting those chips to China?
Well, we think about this race with China every day, constantly. They're trying to become a peer-to-peer adversary to us, and they have been on that journey for a while now. We're still the world's great superpower for a lot of reasons, but we cannot lose the AI race, and it's very serious. It has massive implications, most importantly for national security. And so I hope he's wrong in that analysis. I know he's got a business angle, and I respect his work and what he's doing, and I want them to be successful, obviously. But I think China is an adversary and not an ally. And I think they're playing a long game, and we have to take that very seriously. We have to keep our edge into AI. The last time I checked with my tech gurus and the Silicon Valley leaders out there, they think we're still months ahead, maybe many months ahead of China on the advancement, but that can change, right? So we've got to do what is necessary to keep our edge because a lot is riding on that.
Mr. Johnson, wow, exactly 8:25. I'm really, we got to hit the
government shutdown markets are looking for clues about the health of the job market. Steve Weisman joins us with the latest numbers.
Before we go to the data on the job market, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. This will bring down inflammation, detoxify, and also soak up free radicals. By bringing down inflammation and detoxifying and soaking up free radicals, that's going to help your immune system and your endocrine system, your brain function, your vascular system. Also joint health. A major vector of slowing down the aging process is soaking up free radicals and bringing down inflammation. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you want to get healthy, take the heirloom barley. This is a month's supply. Make sure you use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. All caps, discount 5, and $5 off.
Cots, what's going on?
Yeah, well, this is like a clue from like a cough or a sneeze or whatever. But announced corporate job cuts, Andrew, in the U.S. surging past 1 million so far this year, with 153,000 new layoffs announced just in October, according to Challenger. That is the worst October since 2003. Here are the numbers. October up 153. That compared with September, that's 100,000 more than September, and 100,000 more than this time last year in October 2024. Andy Challenger commenting, some industries are correcting after the hiring boom of the pandemic, but this comes as AI adoption, softening consumer and corporate spending, and rising costs drive belt tightening and hiring freezes. Announced layoffs don't always lead to actual cuts and could take place from attrition. But the report puts in perspective what we've been reporting here day after day, week after week. Series of marquee announcements unveiled in recent weeks across U.S. industries, including UPS, Amazon, Target, among others, Paramount, Rivian, all these companies there. Government has been responsible year to date for 308,000. But look at that, Tech 141. That could be where you see a lot of the AI, maybe some in warehousing, but a big chunk of that's going to be UPS, as well as potentially some hit from reduced flows of trade. Retail is up there, as is services at 64,000. You take out the Doge cuts, the numbers are a bit better at 800,000, but still well above last year. Challenger doesn't see much in the way of hiring, saying announcements are 35% below last year, and they're skeptical about the number of new hires for the holiday season. For some on the Fed, this data, together with other reports, could be the sign they're looking for of job weaknesses about whether to cut in December. Well, guess what? We get to ask a member of the Fed that question directly, 8:30, when we sit down with Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee. Andrew, Joe.
It's going to be fascinating to hear what he's got to say about all this.
Yeah, we got a lot of mixed data. We had the challenge, the ADP was up a little bit, 42. The ISM headline was better, and you saw this, the bond market sold off a little bit that way, 415 on the 10-year. I don't know if that's true this morning. I don't really.
Okay, so before we get to, because we'll talk to Austin later, you have a dual mandate. What do you pay attention to in this world, because it's such a blunt instrument?
The answer is yes.
I think I'm willing to believe that we've hit bottom and we're on our way back up.
For what, jobs?
Yeah.
So that means you don't cut.
I think AI allows you to cut because of productivity. I think
But what about the demand for capital from all of the?
You have the best. You have the best of both worlds. Don't talk about raising.
No, should that raise the
no, I mean,
capital?
Keep cutting. No, I know. Keep cutting.
We got to run, but we're gonna come back. We got Austin Goolsbee.
All right, we're gonna go to the Supreme Court discussion on Fox Business. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. This is dual purpose. This is going to help your immune system and your cardiovascular system. Brings down inflammation and helps you control your lipid profile. Please go to my store. Take this every day. It's really important to take care of your cardiovascular health and to boost up that immune system, especially during the fall and the winter season. Please go to my store, use discount 5, and get the olive leaf extract.
Actually, is U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer. Jameson, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here this morning. You were in the room. Can you tell us a little about how the hearing played out?
Sure, happy to do it, and great to be with you, Maria. I spent yesterday morning in what I call the Super Bowl of trade law, the Supreme Court case on the president's tariff authority. I would say that the justices had mostly fair questions, tough questions. They certainly were tough on the government, but I think anyone who went and saw the second half, which a lot of people turned it off after hearing the government's case, the justices were quite difficult and quite tough on the plaintiffs here. As your correspondent there noted, the plaintiff's position, it has some absurdity to it in that they believe IEPA, the statute in question, would allow the president to completely embargo trade with a country, in other words, stop trade with the country, but not slow it through use of a tariff, and that's an absurd outcome.
Yeah, that does sound absurd, that the president would be able to stop trade but wouldn't be able to slow it with tariffs.
That's exactly right. I mean, the reality is, when you read that statute, the language is incredibly broad, and the justices, pretty much all of them, noted the breadth of the language. They noted that the court starts with an analysis of the plain language of the statute. That's what you look at before you start to try to put a different gloss on it or look at history or other things. You look at the plain language, and the plain language says you can regulate imports, and regulation of imports is almost always done through a tariff.
Now, this issue has been certainly one of the talking points on Wall Street, and there's one analyst at Piper Sandler, Andy LaPerriere, who talked about this a long time ago. He actually told his clients many, many months ago that he did believe that the Supreme Court would ultimately rule that the president does not have unlimited authority to impose tariffs under the IEPA or emergency lever. What are your plans, backup plans, if in fact it does go against you? Jameson, I know this morning we've been talking about things like Section 112, Section 232, Section 301, and 338 in the Constitution. Are you looking at things like that in terms of recreating that kind of revenue?
Well, the first thing I would say, I don't know Andy, but the president has never purported to have unlimited authority in this area. And in fact, his execution of tariffs has limitations. There are certain things you can't tariff. Congress gets to have a say on all of this. There are limitations. Are there other statutes where the president can impose tariffs? Of course there are. He used IEPA because it was absolutely the best fit for the emergency we're facing with the trade deficit and the offshoring of manufacturing. He gives the flexibility that the president needs. I mean, you're facing an emergency, so you need emergency powers. I think if you look at what's gone on with China over the past several months, anyone who thinks we don't have an economic emergency with respect to our trade relations, I think they're living under a rock.
Yeah, these are all really important points that you're making. And to that point, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, your colleague who was with you in the room yesterday, said he's optimistic the court will uphold the president's trade authority, saying that the ruling carrying massive implications, potentially impacting hundreds of billions in tariff revenue, setting new limits on presidential powers on trade. Jameson, how much money are we talking about here? Because when I spoke with the president just a couple of weeks ago, I asked the president for backup plans, and here's what he said to me. Watch this.
What is your backup plan should the Supreme...
HBO Max is available on YouTube. Watch any award-winning TV shows.
Welcome to the pit. Let's save some lives.
Are you okay?
Why wouldn't I be?
What is your backup plan should the Supreme Court decision go against you on the tariffs and the emergency?
Well, I'll have to figure something out. I don't want to even think about it. We're doing so well to think about it. You know, if that happened, we'd have to pay back money. So if anything would happen with that, that would mean they're allowed to use tariffs and we're not. If they took away, this is national security, if they took away tariffs, then they've taken away our national security.
So, Jameson, how much money are we talking about? Are you right now expecting that if this goes against you, that the U.S. will have to pay, what, $150, $200 billion in money back to corporate America? How would that work?
So this year, the president has imposed tariffs under a number of different legal authorities. He's collected, nearing $300 billion this year. A good portion of that came in under tariffs that were not the subject of yesterday's case, Section 232, other national security tariffs. So the reciprocal tariffs that were at issue yesterday, I don't have the exact number, but it's over 100 billion. I think it's going to be less than 200 billion or thereabouts. The court itself signaled that, what do you do in the case that the tariffs are overruled? What do you do with that money? I mean, in some situations, the plaintiffs, specific plaintiffs will get a refund. As for the rest of it, I'll hand that file to the Secretary of the Treasury. He's the one who has all that money in the General Treasury, and you'll have all these importers and importing interests who are going to want that money back. And so, we'll have to figure out probably with the court what kind of the schedule might look like and what the rights are of these parties and what rights the government has to that money.
When are you expecting?
Makes zero sense. That makes zero sense because let's say that the government has to refund. But if you've been listening to some of the talking heads on MSNBC, they're saying the consumer is mostly getting, getting the higher cost. All right, so there's the tariff, but then there was a higher cost that was baked in that the consumer is purchasing. So who gets the money? Is it the importing company? They get the money, but they've already sold the good. Do they refund the same amount that they received to the consumer? No, of course not. So to make everybody whole, who gets the actual rebate? Who gets the refund? Is it the consumer? Does the consumer get 1/3? What happens if in certain products there was 100% of the tariff was baked into the price and it was absorbed by the consumer? Well, that would be easy. All you have to do is just do some sort of give back to the consumer, maybe through taxes, maybe through some sort of tax allowance. But it gets really confusing when you have a tariff placed on the importing company. All right. And then part of the increase was in the price, but the importing company absorbed, let's say, half of the tariff. And the end consumer absorbed the other half. What do you do there? What happens if it's in some products, it's 20, it's 66%. What happens if some products is 1/5? It'd be a nightmare to be able to give it back. So I don't think it's feasible. Because what would happen is the tariff goes to the importer and then the consumer gets nothing. If it all goes to the consumer, then the importer doesn't get anything. That either way is unfair. So how do you make this fair? It's impossible. And I'm shocked that he didn't say this.
Well, the president asked for expedited treatment. It's incredibly important that we know sooner rather than later, get his authorities here. So, I think a lot of folks are saying this may come before the end of the year. I think that's probably right. We know that on a normal schedule, the court may not release, its rulings until spring or even as late as June. My guess is they'll do it sooner than that. And whatever happens, we'll be ready for the next steps.
James, and let me move on to China and this big deal that you were able to secure because of President Trump meeting with Xi Jinping and Secretary Bessent and your meetings with your counterparts as well. China is now easing some of its retaliatory tariffs on U.S. farm goods as part of that new trade deal. Last week, however, soybeans are still facing a 13% duty and a 10% tariff on most U.S. imports. Beijing also suspending new export controls on rare earth metals, ending investigations into chip makers. Can you talk to us a little about what was most important? I mean, for the U.S. side, we need to see those rare earth magnets flow, as well as the rest of the world, as the president has made that point many times. In response, what did the U.S. have to give up?
Well, when we went into those negotiations, we really had three specific goals and one overarching goal. The overarching goal is to have stability in our relationship with China. President Trump and President Xi want this. They want to have a type of relationship where we can be cooperative and not confrontational. And some of the specific goals we had, one, we needed to have those flows of rare earth unimpeded, like you mentioned. It's important for our industrial base and the world industrial base because China imposed this on the world, or threatened to at least. Second, we wanted to make sure that China resumed purchases of American goods, particularly a lot of our ag products that have China as a core destination. And third, we wanted to secure Chinese cooperation on fentanyl controls, which we've secured. What did the United States do on this part? We had some investigations and things related to port fees or export controls extending to affiliates of Chinese companies. We took a pause on those measures for further review. We also reduced the tariff on China by 10 percentage points because of the fentanyl cooperation. But remember, we still have anywhere from 45 to 50% tariffs on China at this time.
And at the same time, there was also a new rule in terms of expanding the entities list, which you said that you would put aside for a year. Is that right? How does that affect Chinese companies? Was that a priority for the Chinese side?
So that was something that was important to the Chinese side. That was really a procedural rule. It wasn't China specific. For 40 years, the United States in implementing export controls, right, controlling technology that can go to certain companies or countries overseas, you do it based on the specific name of a company. The United States said, well, we want to make sure that we're covering the field here. So if there's a subsidiary that's 50% or more owned by one of these listed entities, they should be covered too. We implemented that rule. It ended up increasing, covering a huge swath of companies, not just in China, but in other countries as well. And so we paused that rule. And so we'll just continue with our 40-year practice with export controls as opposed to this procedural move.
Well, look, you've also been pushing, and the president has been aggressive in pushing corporate America to get the supply chains to America and make sure that America is less reliant on the supply chains out of communist China. How long are you expecting that to take? Because at some point, is the U.S. going to be able to refine those rare earth minerals on its own?
Yes, the answer is yes. with the United States, as well as its allies and partners around the world, we are already proceeding to reshore or nearshore rare earth production. Remember, you have the mining, you have the processing and refining, and then you have the manufacturing of the magnets. And these are the steps that we're focused on. You have a lot of these types of mines and facilities in the U.S., but they've been mothballed for 10, 15, 20 years. We're trying to get those back online. And then you have new deposits all over the place, certainly in America, but also in places like Australia. And the president's been going around concluding a memorandum of understanding with a variety of countries with respect to critical minerals and rare earths about working together to explore these deposits, get processing up and running, and make sure that the economics make sense so these companies can get a return on their investment and be economically feasible to produce rare earths right here in America.
And so many companies are relying on that. We spoke with the CEO of Therabody earlier, and he said, look, we need these rare earths. I mean, this is a company that's making wellness products, and you don't initially think about that, but it's not just corporate America, it's also government, whereas we need those rare earths for the military, right?
And yes, and that's what's so frustrating about the Chinese export controls or proposals. When the United States or other countries impose export controls, it's almost always on the highest tech products that we have. I mean, we make all kinds of semiconductors, 95% of them you can ship to China, no problem. They're just a very small set that you don't ship. On the other hand, what China's doing with rare earths, they're purporting to control a very basic technology that the United States pioneered 60 years ago, something that Japan makes. I mean, these are basic inputs into the industrial processes. They're important, but they're not the highest tech thing in the world. The Chinese managed to take control of them largely because of our policy decisions and offshoring all of that production to China. So they're not controlling their highest tech stuff. They're controlling basic inputs for industry worldwide. And that's why it's so concerning that they're trying to do that.
And of course, it was concerning when they came out with the threat that they were going to limit the export of the rare earth minerals, not just to the United States, but the point that you've made, the president has made so many times, it's the world. Everyone needs those. Should the entity list Chinese companies have access to our capital markets? I mean, the president has a lot of levers to pull. He always says, well, I want China to do well as I want the United States to do well. I'm not going to put them in a corner right now. But, I mean, aren't there other more serious and aggressive levers that the U.S. can pull, like yanking those companies off of our exchanges? Wouldn't that put a real scare into the Chinese Communist Party to stop making such threats?
I mean, yes, there are a vast amount of levers that one could exercise, that the president could exercise with respect to the Chinese. There's that kind of thing you're talking about, delisting. There are tax treaties out there that give Chinese companies offering U.S. special benefits. There are other export controls on key inputs that the Chinese need. But that's not the goal. The goal is not to have mutually assured economic destruction between China and the United States right now.
Right.
The goal is to have stability and mutual benefit. And the president, in his wisdom, has given the Chinese a window of opportunity where we can work on that project, as opposed to the confrontational approach, which I don't think anybody really wants.
Yes.
All right, we're going to go to the Hill. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the digestive enzyme complex. This will reduce the load on your pancreas, help you to digest proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. This also has bromelain in it. It's fibrinolytic. That's really important to prevent overclotting. And digestive enzyme complex has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins. Extremely important during the fall and the winter season. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the digestive enzyme complex, boost up the health of your pancreas, and allow you to digest the foods. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
The Supreme Court is weighing on a decision that could have big ramifications for President Trump's economic agenda and maybe other issues. On Wednesday, the court spent hours listening to arguments on the legality of Trump's tariffs.
The Trump administration invoked the sweeping tariffs earlier this year, justifying them by declaring a national emergency. But many justices on the Supreme Court expressed skepticism that the president has the authority to do that. The Hill writes, quote, While liberal justices took the lead in picking apart the Trump administration's arguments, conservative justices Amy Coney Barrett and Chief Justice John Roberts also scrutinized the White House's arguments that the president has authority to impose the levies based on emergency powers. The court, of course, currently has a 6-3 conservative majority, with 3 of those conservative justices having been appointed by President Trump during his first term.
One of the more notable moments during Wednesday's arguments came when Justice Neil Gorsuch asked about the possibility of climate change being used as a justification for the tariffs. Here was the exchange between Gorsuch and Trump's Solicitor General, John Sauer.
Could the president impose a 50% tariff on gas-powered cars and auto parts to deal with the unusual and extraordinary threat from abroad of climate change?
It's very likely that can be done. That's very likely.
I think that has to be in the logic of your view.
Yeah, in other words, this administration would say that's a hoax, it's not a crisis, but...
I'm sure you would.
Yes, but that would be a question for Congress under our interpretation, not for the courts.
Well, that moment was widely criticized by those who opposed the tariffs online, many raising concerns about what it would mean if future presidents could declare an emergency in the same way. Writer Pedro Gonzalez says, "This is so funny, man. The Trump administration wants to open the door for a Democratic administration to be able to declare a national emergency on climate change just because Trump won't accept that tariffs have been a disaster." Economic historian Philip Magnus writes, "Trump's admin argument implies that Congress could cede its entire responsibility in foreign policy to the president. Gorsuch is not buying the admin's position at all."
It could be several months before there's any sort of ruling from the court on this case. But the court has been asked to expedite the decision, so it is possible that we get one sooner rather than later.
Yes, so I followed this very closely. I am not a fan of the tariffs. I'm not a fan of emergency power stuff. I think Gorsuch asked just the question to elicit, I think he wanted that response. He wanted it for the record. The Trump administration is arguing for an executive power that could be used by Democrats for climate emergency or really any other progressive policy. I think, based on what I heard, that the administration is going to lose this one, and which again goes to show how it is more complicated than just 6-3. Conservatives have the court, but people on the court are independent thinking and frankly more deferential to ideologically conservative principles that predate Trump. It seemed pretty clear that you had Amy Coney Barrett against this, and I think Gorsuch plus the liberals will make maybe Roberts, maybe Kavanaugh, I don't know, will make this dead.
Yeah, it certainly seems that there's a lot of skepticism, including from the conservative majority. And there are really interesting issues within this that go broader than the tariffs themselves. One is one of the liberal justices was saying, well, look, tariffs are a tax, aren't they? They clearly are. And the government's position is, well, no, they're not really. There's something different from a tax. But they are effectively a tax, and they're a way of getting revenue for the government and getting it off private individuals. And so if you concede the point that the president can just impose this, you're essentially taking the power of taxation away from Congress and handing it to your president.
The proposals to tax must, according to the Constitution, originate in the House of Representatives.
Right.
It's written in the Constitution.
Right.
So that you could not have an executive. I mean, this was, if you go back to our founding documents and our founding circumstances, one of the main complaints of the colonists as they rebelled from Britain and started their own country was having taxation from the authorities without the ability of, without having an elected and a democratic body that was elected by the people, that was accountable to the people, weighing in on that issue. That was one of their cardinal problems and motivations for the rebellion, which is why it was structured so that the House, the most democratic aspect of our government, must originate taxation schemes.
Right.
So this is just so contrary to that.
Exactly, because here you have a president essentially delving in and taking those powers for himself. The other point that I think is very particular to Trump in a way is this propensity he has to believe that you can just declare an emergency in various ways and do whatever you like. And that is what he's claiming in this case. But of course, he's claiming that in various other elements of policy as well. I mean, in immigration, the Alien Enemies Act, for example, is just, well, I've decided that we're being invaded by Venezuela against really all available evidence, and therefore I'm just
These people have small brain talk here. Small brain talk. What happens? What happens when Congress is captured by globalists through campaign financing or whatever? And when Congress is captured, do you really get good representation? So if you have transnational capitalists capturing Congress, preventing Congress from creating a tax law or tariffs that you want, let's say, the president to bring back manufacturing over time to improve our economy and our war prowess, our military prowess. But you have a Congress that's not willing to institute those taxes to bring back manufacturing because it's captured by transnationalists. Then you have a weakened country. And no one talks about this. No one. No one. And that's exactly what's happening. Congress doesn't do the job because they're captured by the transnationalists, the very ones that Trump is trying to institute taxes on to cattle prod them to move manufacturing back here. So what is Congress? Congress basically represents the transnational capitalist, not the people, not we the people. Big problem. So our manufacturing gets gutted. Our military prowess gets gutted. And then all of a sudden there's an emergency, a war, and you don't have the means to win. And it's too late then. It's too late. We have a lot more complicated situation, a lot more complicated supply chain worldwide than what we had in the 1700s or 1800s, or even the 1900s. So if you either do a soft landing with the economy by instituting taxes and moving manufacturing back to the United States, or you're going to have a hard landing. And so what's happening is that you'll have these constitutionalists, intellectuals saying, well, the president doesn't have that power. Okay, then have Congress do it. Congress won't do it because it's captured. So in essence, if the Supreme Court rules that the tariff implementation currently is not in the authority of the executive branch, which probably is the case, and I'd probably agree with that. But because they're so smart, they're stupid. They kick the can to Congress, and Congress won't act. And because Congress doesn't act, we literally will be weakened for a war. So they're all right. You have these people in Congress saying the president doesn't have the authority. You have the SCOTUS saying the president doesn't have the, okay, maybe you're right. But what are you going to do to solve the problem? What are you going to do to bring back manufacturing? And what are you going to do to make sure that our military prowess is sustained? And they do nothing. And then all of a sudden there's a crisis. So all these intellectuals literally weaken the country.
Emergency powers. There was the other thing, and I think this was in the Khalil case, where the State Department used that little part of the law that says you can remove anyone who is adverse to American foreign policy interests, a condition or a clause that was really intended to be for like major political figures who are somehow setting up camp in the United States and not random individuals who disagree with a particular administration's foreign policy. So
globalization can, not always, but can create a pernicious situation in an emerging property that leads to the instability of a nation and its military prowess. And that is what is starting to emerge. And Congress isn't willing to do anything about it. Why? Because it's captured. It's captured by the very people that you want to tariff. So what will happen is that the society will start to devolve, and that there will literally be a revolution that's like the French Revolution. Not the American Revolution, the French Revolution, where Congress is beheaded.
Propensity to just lean on emergency powers and define them in this enormously expansive way, I think is very dangerous.
The scope, certainly, the scope of what's getting considered an emergency and by the Trump administration, I would never claim that Trump is the first person to do this. Every president, in my view, has kicked open the door to further executive powers. I was very against President Biden issuing a mandate for 80 million workers to get vaccinated under...
Right, exactly. The president shouldn't have these sweeping powers. He's right. The president shouldn't have it. But Congress should do their fucking job.
Workplace safety policies, OSHA. I'm actually going to talk about vaccine mandates, I think, coming up next on the show. So I was, very against that, very against all the ways Obama and, of course, Bush massively expanded in the face of, maybe you would even say an actual emergency, in the face of terrorist attack on the country and our foreign policy. But even in that case, we've come to regret, really regret, Republicans have come to regret powers bestowed on the executive in response to that emergency. Now we're just, everything's an emergency. What do you think, Trump people, what do you think the next Democrat is going to do when he's in office? But I guess their view is just, well, the Democrats are going to do it anyway, so we might as well. But we're making it a lot easier for them to do it when you're coming up with justifications to do overreaching policy, and then you're defending them in court. Democrats don't have to defend them in court if they've already been defended by you.
Right, exactly. And to basically defend the principle that your enemies can then use against you whenever they get involved.
Blunt the weapons of the oppressors is my strategy if I was ever in office. But Republicans don't follow it.
Maybe it's time for the 2028 swap.
Can you imagine that?
I don't know that you will.
Well, just imagine if Trump said, okay, can't do tariffs, I'm going to cut all trade. It's in his power to do that. He could cut all trade. Not the tariffs, but he can just say, because of national security, we're cutting trade with all these nations. Can you imagine what will happen with the stock market? The stock market will go from 6,800 to 200. What's happening is there's an emergent property that's taking place that extreme measures will have to be used. Either the use of nuclear weapons or the use of extreme measures in terms of shutting down the economy. See, if you don't soft land this and bring back manufacturing to the United States, that increases the probability of nuclear detonation between the United States and China if there's a war in the Pacific. Because the first thing that in terms of strategy, you need to destroy their manufacturing base. And because of these missiles, these ICBMs, you only have 6 minutes to make your move. So that means that you have to hit hard. So all this intellectual talk increases the probability of nuclear weapon detonation. Pseudo-intellectuals here. Dumbasses. All right, let's go. Let's go to Iran and Russia strike very dangerous New Deal. And you got to remember, Trump chickened out by not killing the Ayatollah.
We took a process that probably took 3 or 4 days if you really put your head down with a couple people. It took 2 hours. This company is actually my second company that would...
At the ADIPEC Summit underway in Abu Dhabi, industry leaders across the globe discussing the state of the energy industry and how to meet the rising power demands of artificial intelligence. Here's Interior Secretary Doug Burgum at the event.
Energy has always been integral to to national security, and energy has always been the underpinning of any nation's prosperity. Now, for the first time in history, we take the miracle of electricity and the invention and the innovation of computing, and we marry them together, and a kilowatt of electricity is more valuable than ever before. A kilowatt of electricity can be converted directly into intelligence. For the first time in humanity's history, we can manufacture intelligence. The demand for power is going to go up and up and up. Today is the day to announce that there is...
It's not intelligence, it's pseudo. Artificial intelligence? Let's just break down the word. Artificial intelligence? Artificial. It's fake. Intelligence. Fake intelligence. Pseudo intelligence. It's not making intelligence, you're making fake intelligence. Get real.
Energy transition. There is only energy addition.
The U.S. securing its strategic energy partnership with Kazakhstan to maintain flagship oil and gas projects in that region. There now live from the ADIPEC summit in Abu Dhabi is the former Energy Secretary, Dan Brulette. Dan, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. How would you compare energy capacity and potential today versus when you were the Secretary?
Well, thanks for having me, Maria. It's an exciting time here at ADIPEC. There's over 200,000 people here, well over 100 governments represented, CEOs from every part of the industry. So a fantastic time. And if I think I could define it in one word, it's just realism. What has changed over the last 5 years is a focus now on energy security, on reliability, on resilience, and importantly, Maria, affordability. And Secretary Doug Burgum has it exactly right. What is really, really exciting is that for the first time in human history, we're not going to be using energy simply for the purposes of, producing goods and services, underpinning economies for parts of, manufacturing and things like that. We're actually going to create knowledge through the use of these data centers and AI.
Well, think about this for a second. We have a cloud, all right? Let's just pretend that AI doesn't even exist for a second, just for sake of argument here. This is what I'm so tired of. People are so fucking stupid. So fucking stupid that actually have decision-making power. Just imagine, as an experiment, there's no it's artificial intelligence, all right? Or pseudo-intelligence. And you have an older economy, let's say in the 1970s or the 1980s, all right? You have the computerization of the 80s and the 90s. Let's use that as an example. All right? And you're using energy to run the computers at a company. All right? The company, let's say, is a mortgage company, and it's computerized all of its mortgage process, and it does its payments on the computer and all this stuff, all right? In a database of their customers, everything is computerized. But they have data entry and all this, all right? Someone fills out a mortgage, maybe if it's even online, or maybe back in the day where you actually filled out real paper for the mortgage and then submitted it to your bank. But it's now computerized. They're burning energy, all right? They're using up energy to run the electric grid, to run the computers, to digitize the information. And that information can be queried from a database for accounting reports, understanding the balance of a particular customer, whatever, all right? But there was the use of energy to digitize, to hold on a server or on a hard drive somewhere, cloud, all right? Now let's think about manufacturing for cars. The use of energy to make steel. The use of energy to create the actual steel stamping. Making a die, a stamp die, that stamps the steel to make a car body. That's the use of energy. And now you take that and assemble all these other different components that used energy. And you sell this. And the person that buys the car is in a database. And that information of that customer also needed energy to maintain the server and to put that customer information into digits. They buy that car and they're using that car and they have to fill it with gasoline. So they're using energy too. You need a road repair. They use energy for that too. All right. The point I'm making is that there's nothing really different. Don't fall for the trap. There's nothing really different from the digitization of information in the 1980s, the 1990s, 2000, 2010, 2020s than today. Don't fall for the trap, oh, it's AI and so much different. No, what it is it's faster. There's more information being built up. Big data, more data is being collected, and as it's using these neural networks to try to find patterns and build new patterns, new data, new information, it's not intelligence. It's just a machine algorithm to find patterns or build new information and store it. But these algorithms that they're using, these neural networks, are very energy hogging. They need lots of energy. It's not an efficient process when you compare it to the human brain. The human brain can compute a lot, and all you need to do is eat a tuna sandwich. Try that with a server. The server needs a nuclear powered plant. Your brain doesn't need a nuclear power plant. You ever wonder why? Because it's more efficient, right? So they market this whole idea that, oh, this is new intelligence. No, it's inefficient data creation. So you need to dive in and like parse the words. It's artificial intelligence. That means it's fake. And secondly, it's not energy efficient because it doesn't even come close to how we create information in the brain through the utilization of energy. The food that we bring in and how the body metabolizes it. Computer science is not even close. I mean, not even 0.1% close to how the brain works. So don't fall into the trap. Now, that doesn't mean that artificial intelligence or pseudo-intelligence, fake intelligence, won't take jobs away, because it is faster. It can do things. But the thing is that, is it overall efficient? If you have 10 people, think about this as a thought experiment. If you have 10 people doing a job, all right, and it costs, let's say, $100,000 for each person, and that's $1 million per year in salary and, I don't know, benefits and all this, right? That's just an example. Let's say you can create an AI and you can get rid of all those 10 people. And that AI to make costs, let's just say, $1 million, right? To run the algorithms, the energy. I'm just using this as an example. So your break even is 1 year. But let's say that to run subsequent years, this AI, and to maintain its fake intelligence, you have to spend $500,000 in energy. Now, if you copy and paste this kind of concept across the country, we're going to use more energy than we've ever done it before. Well, are we really that more productive? Depends on how you define productivity in terms of work product with the number of people that are used to make the work product, that's productivity? Or is it the amalgamation of overall energy used in the society relative to the overall products that are produced? Now, I'm willing to bet that when you look at that type of equation, the conclusions are different. get to the point here. Artificial intelligence, pseudo-intelligence, fake intelligence is inefficient. And it's bad for society in a lot of ways, but especially in energy consumption.
The other technologies that we're talking about, he succinctly phrased it as, you know, we used to say that knowledge is power. Now we can say power is knowledge. And that's an inflection point that I think cannot be overstated.
Yeah, it's a great point. Meanwhile, a new report shows Iran is planning for a large-scale...
What about the mechanization of war in World War II, where these machines needed energy? Well, power was energy. See what I mean? This is like they're not paying attention. They're not paying attention to the arc of history. It's just a sales guy. Just a fucking sales guy. A sales guy would say something like something stupid like this.
Nuclear energy expansion. Iran recently signed a contract with Russia covering 8 new nuclear units, all part of Tehran's plan to reach 20 gigawatt nuclear energy capacity. America currently leads the world in nuclear energy production at over 96,000 megawatts compared to Iran's 915, Dan. And the president has made nuclear part of his all-hands-on-deck energy proposals here. Your reaction?
Well, the president is exactly right. I mean, look, the situation in Iran, I think, is very dangerous. Russia has a long history of supporting Iran, developing some nuclear facilities there. We know what it has led to. It led to a weapons program that is very, very dangerous for the world. And I would caution everyone to be careful about this announcement that was just made.
Right.
With regard to
right.
baseload power,
and if we did the job correctly and killed the Ayatollah, this would not have happened. Trump chickened out. Israel was willing to kill the Ayatollah. Trump chickened out. See, this is the problem. Just knocking out the facilities isn't good enough. You got to destroy the theocratic regime to stop this bullshit from happening.
The United States, the president is moving exactly in the right direction. What he's trying to do there is develop new sources of generation, electricity generation. As I mentioned earlier, we're all excited about AI. We understand clearly what the AI demand will place upon the U.S. grid. I've seen estimates that, you know, AI alone could take up roughly 10% of the nation's electricity grid. It's important for us to remember, however, that there's another 90% here, and it's growing as well. The president's economic program is bringing manufacturing back to the United States. That is also creating additional demand. So it's very important that we develop new forms of generation. That's going to include small modular reactors. It's going to include as well, Maria, the life extension of natural gas plants and perhaps even some coal plants.
Well,
we have to keep what is known as baseload power online.
You make a great point, but I just went to the Permian Basin. We are just back from the Permian Basin, and I watched the fact that we're selling natural gas at a discount. We're selling it at a loss in many cases because we've got so much natural gas, and we don't have the pipeline infrastructure in place to actually get it delivered. So in different spots of Permian, you see natural gas getting flared up.
That's exactly right, Maria. The challenge in America is no longer production. We know how to produce molecules. We're the largest producer of oil and gas in the world. We're the largest exporter of LNG, liquefied natural gas in the world. We know how to produce energy, and we can produce electrons. Our challenge in America is actually getting it to the markets. It's getting it to the water in the case of natural gas, and it's moving electrons from where they're generated to where the loads are. And that's a permitting issue here in the United States that we have to fix.
Yeah, the infrastructure is getting built.
You ever wonder? Just a year ago, they kept on saying, wait a minute, you have to control your carbon footprint. Oh, wait a minute, we have to, you know, go all in with sustainability, and you have to have, you have to move away from natural gas and all this stuff. They said this on purpose because they knew that they needed the natural gas to run the AI systems. And so what they wanted to do was make sure there's enough supply for Microsoft that's cheap, or OpenAI, or for Apple, or whoever is going to be making the LLMs, instead of the end user, the end consumer, the homeowner having cheaper gas. They wanted to demonize your usage so corporate America can use it up to build their AI. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Goodnight Formula. Goodnight Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, and GABA, and passion flower to help you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep or deep sleep. Now, what that will do is detoxify your central nervous system, consolidate memory, and you'll be well rested. And you do that regularly, you're going to slow down the aging process. Now, if you are sleep deprived regularly, chronically, you're not getting enough sleep chronically, you're increasing the probability of losing your memory. Early onset of dementia. You don't want that. Please go to my store, protect your brain, so you can actually see the world the way it really is. Get the Goodnight Formula. Use it every night. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Goodnight Formula. Use discount 5, get $5 off any order. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. As we continue with the sales pitch.
President Trump is trying to ease the permitting positioning there.
That's correct.
Exactly. Well, the administration is also freeing up $100 million to modernize America's existing coal mines. So for this year, the U.S. produced over 132 million tons of coal in the first quarter, more than 128 million in the second quarter, Dan. How important is coal production in your view?
Well, coal production is very important because it not only provides electricity generation, it's going to lead us to critical mineral production as well here in the United States. So that's something that we have to bring home, and we've ignored the importance of the coal industry for far too long. So it's important. I think the president's doing the right thing. I think the Department of Energy is doing the right thing by encouraging not only production here, but the advancement and the production and the processing, I should say, of things like critical minerals, which are key to our iPhones and all the other technologies that we've talked about. But I'll make one other point as well, Maria. When I talked about demand, I talked about electricity demand. We generate, I should say, or create new generation of about 50 to 55 gigawatts of electricity every year. We need to increase that to about 80 to 85 just to keep up with the current demand. So we are woefully short. So to the extent that we're going to extend life, the life of these coal plants, that's a great thing for the economy today.
Look, I know that the demand is spiking because of the AI build out, but I'm still questioning the AI building numbers. I mean, you're talking about trillions of dollars in expectations moving into AI data centers and the build out there. When will we see a return on investment on all that money, do you think?
Well, it's a difficult question, Maria. If I knew that, I'd be a very rich person. I think, I think what's going to happen over the course of the next few months and perhaps a year or so is that you're going to see the winnowing out of some of these projects. Folks are really excited. They're placing bets on various projects around the country. They're working closely with utilities. They're developing options for perhaps cogen, what's known as cogen, behind the meter generation. As the investments start to come to the table, however, you're going to start to see some real sharp pencils hit that paper, and some of these projects are going to go away. That being said, a lot of them will get built, and they are getting built today. And as that technology moves its way into our daily lives, into these businesses, they become more efficient. We're going to see the productivity gains that are associated with that and the investment returns that are going to come from those initial dollars that were placed.
Yeah, and I think Interior Secretary Doug Burgum tried to make the point that energy security is national security.
Okay. It is indeed. It is indeed. And that's something that I think has been lost as I think we sort of lost our way, frankly, in the last couple of years, where we looked at energy policy almost exclusively through the lens of environmental science.
Right.
Almost, an exclusive focus on climate change. Now we're coming back and we're understanding how important is reliability, how important is resilience, and those connections to national security as well as economic security. And I think it's the right policy focus. I think the president's doing exactly the right thing by bringing us back to fundamentals.
All right, great to talk with you this morning. Thanks so much, Dan Brillette. Enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thank you, Maria.
Good to see.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin D3. This is really important to take during the fall and winter season. It helps cells to go into apoptosis if they're infected. Vitamin D3 also helps as a gene expression cofactor, so your cells are performing properly. Vitamin D3 soaks up absorbs calcium. So if you're doing resistance training, you're going to be able to remodel your bones and your bone density will increase. In addition, vitamin D3 is great for your cardiovascular health. Please go to my store, get the vitamin D3, take it every day. Ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is a great way to soak up free radicals because it's an antioxidant. It also helps the health of your mitochondria. It'll increase your ATP levels so you have more energy, and it'll protect your neurons. Super important if you're 40 years of age or older. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can purchase. Most people that take CoQ10, you're probably taking the wrong kind. Go to my store, get the Ubiquinol. It's the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can get. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Zeolite. Detoxify your body, help your immune system and your endocrine system. And by detoxifying your body regularly, you're helping with your brain and your liver and your kidneys and your bladder and your spleen. Amazing how that works. Now, Zeolite works by binding to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allows you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Take it every day. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue. It's really important to detoxify your body. Please go to my store and get the Zeolite. Get the Ubiquinol and get the D3. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen in about Mamdani.
Ring a bell will be the same Lena Khan who declared war on business during her time back during Biden's administration. She was FTC chair. She's now back, worse than ever, according to many, including my co-host here. One of Zoran's first hires, Ms. Khan, has been tapped to join the communists' transition team.
During her much-hated tenure in Washington, D.C., Lena Khan made headlines for blocking dozens of major mergers, arguing FTC is the Federal Trade Commission, that these mergers would hurt consumers, stifle competition. Joining us now to chew on this, Steve Moore, Unleash Prosperity co-founder, former Trump economic advisor. Lena Khan is single-handedly the reason that much of Silicon Valley voted for President Trump. They despised her that much.
Well, you're exactly right about that. And it's, if there's any area where the United States has been completely globally dominant, it has been in the tech industry with, the Magnificent Seven that have a greater value than all of the companies in Europe combined. We should be proud of that in America, that, all of the iPhones and all of the internet and so much of the social media has really been dominated by the U.S. and it's made so many tens of millions of Americans rich because they own it. But I want to mention another one. There was a very famous merger between Spirit Airlines and one of the JetBlue. Yeah. And JetBlue wanted to buy Spirit, and it would have created a fifth major airline. It made a lot of sense, and in fact, it would have increased competition in the airline industry. And the FTC blocked it, along with the Justice Department. And what happened? Spirit went out of business. The shareholders got screwed. It's basically limping along now, and you don't have that fifth competitor. So they're oftentimes driving American companies into bankruptcy, but not by not allowing these mergers.
Mamdani looks at that track record and that legacy and says, "That's my gal, right? Bring her in."
Exactly.
What does that portend in your mind for governance here in New York starting very soon?
It's going to be communist.
I've said this over again. By the way, it's a tragedy. It really is a tragedy what's happened in New York City. It's the most important city in the world. And this is going to be a brutal experiment. And look, I hope I'm wrong. I hope it does turn out. But, show me somewhere where it has worked out, where,
Socialism has always failed, but it's not just socialism. He's pushing communism. And not just that. Not just that. You got a bunch of hipsters from Brooklyn that pushed him over the edge. The bulk of the difference, the differential between Cuomo and Mamdani came out of Brooklyn. Bunch of hipsters. Socialist hipsters. God needs to have an asteroid hit Brooklyn to get rid of the hipsters.
Policies have led to more economic growth. And it is true that the big, you've probably seen the cartoon of, the Statue of Liberty, hitchhiking on the road to get out of New York now. I mean, we kind of laugh about that, but it has real implications. I believe, that you're on Fox Business, you're a financial show. I really do believe that there's a good chance that Wall Street, at the end of his term, if he does all the things he's talking about, will no longer be the financially dominant.
He's right about that.
States.
It's going to go to South. It's going to go to the South.
On Wall Street may move to Dallas, Texas, or may move to Miami, Florida. But you can't punish capital if you want to be the capital country of the world, capital of the world. It doesn't make any sense.
The real job creators have been the very technology companies run by the very people who don't like her. And they didn't like her at the FTC because when you cannot merge with another company, when a regulator gets in your way, you block off ways of getting out of investment, private investment, say if you're a venture capitalist. So maybe she's gonna, come up with a plan to just jettison all the job creators like Google and Facebook who've moved here in recent years. So, Steve Moore, great to see you, sir.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you too.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. You can get it in VeggieCap form or in the powder form. I prefer
in case you folks thought that he was just going to stick it to the billionaire class, it really depends on which billionaires, because Alex Soros just wished to.
Hey, all right, we'll play that too. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the VeggieCap probiotic or the powder probiotic. I take the powder probiotic because I take a lot of these different powders, like the collagen and the lignans and the Gladiator barley and the Boomer Boost. All right. So it's just easier for me to take in soft foods. But get either the powdered version or the VeggieCap version. Both are very high quality. All the products I have are very high quality. All right. They may be a little bit more expensive, but they're extremely high quality. And it's stuff that I take every day to slow down the aging process. And I'm in my 50s. All right. With that said, take the probiotic every day, drink it with filtered water, and it's going to help your gut biome. And by improving your gut biome, you're improving the communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. And that means that you're going to be able to sleep better. That means that you're going to get rid of brain fog. That means that you're going to be able to concentrate. That means that your cognition, real intelligence, will actually improve. Now, your skin will improve also. And with a good gut biome, your immune system improves. Good health starts at the gut. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the VeggieCap version or the powdered version. Take them every day. Make sure you drink it with filtered water. And another great supplement that I have, if you want to take, is the collagen. This is a month supply. You can mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even just with milk, or even coffee. Now, with the collagen, it'll help with your skin, your nails, your hair. It'll also help with musculature, bone density, and the health of your joints and cartilage. Please go to my store, take this every day, drink it with filtered water, and if you stack it with the vitamin C, and you're drinking about 32 to 64 ounces of filtered water throughout the day, they'll cross-link and improve your dermal layer for your skin. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the collagen. Use discount 5 to get $5 off any order. All right, I want to play The Hill. They're talking about Mamdani.
Welcome back to Rising. Niall, what's in your notes today?
I'm glad you asked, Robert. Today, I want to pay tribute of a kind to Zoran Mamdani, to his success in winning election as mayor of New York City, to the thousands of New Yorkers who volunteered for him, and the more than 1 million people who voted for him. They all beat the odds in their own way. It's worth reminding ourselves just how
He's a socialist. I mean, the guy on the Hill. How could Niall start clapping for Mamdani? He's literally going to destroy capitalism. I mean, literally, the United States is having a heart attack.
Well, Mamdani's rise appeared 1 year ago. Back then, he was a virtual unknown, a young Democratic Socialist state assemblyman. When his campaign began, he was at 1% in the polls. That was among Democrats.
Do you know how you can tell that Mamdani is not a real New Yorker? Because he doesn't talk like a real New Yorker. A real New Yorker would say something like this. He's a fucking communist.
And in the end, he beat Andrew Cuomo twice. Cuomo, a former governor, the son of a former governor, the favorite of the Democratic Party's centrist Clintonite faction, and the favorite of some of New York's most powerful business interests. Mamdani first beat him in the primary in June, and beat him again on Tuesday. And that's good, because...
Brought to you by the Brooklyn hipster. Bunch of socialists. Drinking their latte. Dreaming of a utopic world under Marxism.
Beating Cuomo, he beat back those powerful interests and beat back the well-funded politics of fear. Look at this chart from Open Secrets, an organization that traces money in politics. That orange line you see there shows the money given to outside groups either to help Cuomo or to stop Mamdani. The green line, way below it, is the money given to help Mamdani or to stop Cuomo. The difference there speaks for itself. Mamdani beat back some disgraceful media coverage too, coverage that was often hysterical, fear-mongering, or blatantly bigoted.
Bigoted? He's a fucking communist.
Against a Uganda-born Muslim. Now, believe me, I know there are many members of our audience who don't share Zoran Mamdani's democratic socialist beliefs. But I'd like to think that even some of those who disagree with his ideology might at least have some quiet admiration for his outsider victory. The people beat the power brokers in New York on Tuesday, and that's always a good thing. Here's the man himself, underlining that point in his victory speech in Britain.
Thank you to those so often forgotten by the politics of our city who made this movement their own. I speak of Yemeni bodega owners and Mexican abuelas, Senegalese taxi drivers and Uzbek nurses, Trinidadian line cooks and Ethiopian aunties. Yes, aunties. To every New Yorker in Kensington and Midwood and Hunts Point, know this. This city is your city, and this democracy is yours too.
This democracy is yours too. That's a message we don't hear enough in our politics, and that's another thing about...
Plato warned us of people like him. The plebs that aren't educated will destroy, quote, democracy and lead to tyranny.
Mamdani's win. It's in part a rebuke to the democratic establishment as well. A rebuke to a party leadership that he cast as too weak, too fearful, and too corporatist. A rebuke to policy positions that are too often driven by the desires of big donors or the fear of offending them. Mamdani's morality, he said elsewhere in his speech, would be guided by a, quote, bold vision, rather than a, quote, list of excuses for what we are too timid to attack. I want to say a couple of words about his vision. It's been cast as scary or subversive by his opponents in politics and in the media. Here, for example, is the New York Post front page on the day after his election. But what is the program that the Post and Rupert Murdoch are portraying as Soviet-style communism? A promise of free childcare for little kids aged 5 and under. A promise that city buses will be free. A promise to open one.
Who's going to pay for it? Taxes. And taxes are paid by the people. So they literally, because of the inefficiency of government, it's going to cost more than just buying a ticket.
One city-run grocery store in each of New York's 5 boroughs. And how will it all be paid for, the critics cry? Mamdani has already given his answer many times. It's by nudging up the city's corporate tax rate so it's on par with neighbouring New Jersey, and by adding just 2% to the income tax rate.
And don't you think those companies are going to leave and go to Texas, then go to Florida? So the tax base starts to drop. His socialistic policies will look like they're slightly working for about 12 months. And then all of a sudden a crash will happen. It always happens. Socialism, but you look at it in detail, it always falls like this. Now, if you don't believe me, read the book by Rand Paul about the myths of socialism. I forgot the title, but it was published maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. It's a great book. Make sure you read it, because socialism doesn't work.
Earning $1 million or more. Only in America, where Democrats as well as Republicans often sing from the billionaire's song sheet, would offering free childcare for all, or asking the wealthy to pay 2% more tax, be seen as dangerously radical. But that's the point about Mamdani's candidacy. It was unafraid, and courage, just like cowardice, is contagious. That's why billionaires try to nip it in the bud. And it's why Zoran's victory speech has gone viral too. Because it felt good to see someone show some guts for once, to stand up to Trump and to stand up for this nation's greatest city, a city that I, like many immigrants, first called home here in America. And to do it all like this.
New York will remain a...
So we bring in immigrants that want to push communism?
City of immigrants, a city built by immigrants, powered by immigrants, and as of tonight,
destroyed by immigrants.
And immigrants.
Or, theoretically,
does a rising tide really lift all boats? Well, rising tides can do a lot of things.
Some cookies sweeten your holidays, while the wrong ones slow down your math.
Or, to do it like this.
This is not only how we stop Trump, it's how we stop the next one. So Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
Mamdani's win was so emotional for so many because it offered hope. We haven't had a lot of that recently. We need more of it. And on Tuesday, we felt it stir one more time. Turn the volume up. Indeed.
Well, I don't want to yuck your yum, Niall, and I'm happy for you. And look, I'll give him a chance, just like I would anyone else. He is clearly a talented political figure. He is, and he kicks
No, Robbie. You need to get on the fucking on the battlefield and stop communism. Stop patty caking with a bunch of communists. Bullshit. Well, I hope he's successful. If he's successful, they're going to push more communism in this country, you dumbass.
And they deserved it. The establishment put up no reasonable alternative to Mamdani. So this is not, I don't have, my hair is not on fire. I'm not screaming that it's come to this. I think some of his idealism will run into will face practical difficulties in,
blah, 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 blah. That's Robbie. Blah, 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 blah. He's a conservative, but blah, 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 blah. Lots of conservatives are just not paying attention. I'm telling you, what Bannon is saying is right. And I'm not 100% on board with Bannon. But I'll tell you, we win, they lose. It's that simple.
Elements of the city into working with him, and it is probably likely his governance will not be any further left than Bill de Blasio's was. Is that Soviet-style communism? Probably not. I won't use that rhetorical excess. I did, it's not that I'm so against him, but I do, I'm watching the victory fanfare there, and AOC's there, and she's on her high horse, and Lena Khan is going to be on the transition team, whom I despise. And then Hassan Piker is there talking about how the Soviet Union should have won. And I'm like, okay, well, now we're getting into some real radicalism. And I just don't like to see Hassan Piker happy about anything. But whatever, it's not my night, it's yours. So.
Well, the Hassan Piker Soviet Union thing, I wouldn't share that view. But I do think, AOC, naturally enough, celebrating a campaign that she herself supported. There was that big rally about a week or so shortly before early voting began with AOC and Bernie Sanders and Mamdani. And I just think that the fact that there was so much money shoveled in against them, so much I regard sort of ludicrous media coverage.
The reality of the situation, Cuomo was a poor candidate to run. And not only that, his ground game was terrible. Mamdani's ground game was better. But the thing is, it's just because he ran a better campaign, a.k.a. Mamdani, that doesn't mean that his policies are going to be good for New York. And I'm telling you, he is dangerous. And you pay attention to what he was saying. Didn't he sound a hell of a lot like Barack Obama?
We're about to flee New York the moment he wins and all that rubbish. So the fact that he was able to do that, and the fact, honestly, that Andrew Cuomo ran at times a very ugly campaign, I thought, especially in the final days of that campaign, sort of giving a nod and a wink to some of the awful stuff that was said in relation to sort of 9/11 and somehow linking Mamdani to that purely on the basis of his faith.
Oh, in addition to that, I was offended by the way Cuomo and his backers treated Curtis Lewa, frankly, because you're not you can make a pitch to those voters. They didn't really do that. It was more like, no, you don't want Mamdani, so you're obligated to vote for me rather than Curtis Lewa. A vote for Lewa is a vote for Mamdani. I just reject that kind of logic entirely. Make a pitch for his voters then. Didn't do that. It was more an entitlement that, well, no, I'm the legitimate opposition. You're not. You lost your party's primary, dude. That's the Republican candidate. Exactly. Why shouldn't you get out and support him? Why does he have to get out to support you? It doesn't make any sense. And then you could, if you put their vote together, Mamdani, he got clear 50%. He just barely, but he did. So it's stupid.
Who knew that we could find common ground on Zoran Mamdani? I find it.
God, I can't stand that frickin'. I'll tell you, he's nuts. Mamdani's nuts. All right, let's listen to Glenn Beck. But before we do that, before Mamdani starts taxing cookies in New York City, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Myotrol. Myotrol will help with the gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. Super important if you're 40 years of age or older, or if you're an athlete, younger or older. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with that gene expression. Take the Myotrol, do your resistance training, and slow down the aging process. And so you don't turn into a communist, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the clarity factor. You got to get rid of that brain fog. because there's a lot of stupid people out there. Get rid of the brain fog, and then you'll be a capitalist, not a communist. Get the clarity factor, and what that will do is get rid of that brain fog and help with the neuroplasticity, so you're thinking faster, and you're going to be able to consolidate your memory and retrieve that memory better, and you'll be able to concentrate on tasks. So please get the clarity factor and don't be a communist, all right?
A warm congratulations. That's comforting. The New York Post cover says pretty much everything. On your marks, get set, zo. Okay, so going into it yesterday, I was optimistic. I actually thought that Andrew Cuomo had a chance to win. If you took the raw votes from Curtis Sliwa and added them to Cuomo, it would have been a much, much tighter race. And I'm still really impressed with New York City, the turnout close to record levels. But
it was close. It was close, but you got to add in. Here's another perfect example how the mainstream media, no matter if it's more conservative or more liberal, the mainstream media they're run by stupid people. There's another added really important data point that you need to pay attention to. The number of people that are anti-communist that actually left the city to move to Florida or to Texas. If you add back in the exodus and the way they would have voted, Mamdani wouldn't have won. So what you have is a skewed population of the remnant of what's left of the the voters in New York. And it's being more and more skewed to the hipster Brooklynite with their latte and communism. But we're going to go back to Fox News, the geniuses.
The socialist Democrat, or Democrat socialist, whatever he goes by these days, otherwise known as the communist, he did pull it through. The New York voters, I'm sorry, it leaves me speechless, really just thinking about what happened. But
because you're a stupid ass.
And we have to accept that outcome and think about what lies ahead.
I can't wait to see how the other Democrats, the ones in Washington, try to normalize DSA, 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 DS, not USA, which is what we heard last night. New York City, however, I was watching last night and thought, why did it take so long? New York City is socialist. The city is run like a socialist economy. That's what it is.
It's literally, we are seeing the fall of New York in real time. It's literally just crashing.
Fully socialized medicine. We have a network of city-run and operated hospitals and health clinics. If you break down the city's budget, oh, by the way, New York City is the biggest employer in New York City. It's, I think, more than 300,000 people are employed just by the New York City government, full-time employees. But if you break down the budget, you've got 27% of the total budget is just for education spending. You have another 17.
The S&P 500 is selling off even more. If you've been paying attention to the dashboard, it's at 6,715. It broke the support level. The next support level is 6,650.
For social service agencies, and then another 29% of the budget, other agency spending on, I said this yesterday, fringe benefits and pensions is another 22%. It's socialized. That's all it is. So this is a jerk circle that you have elected a socialist to fix problems created by socialism. Well done. Last night, however, listening to that speech, and he quoted, I think, Mario Cuomo when he said, "You run with poetry, but you govern with prose." I think that's a Mario Cuomo quote. That's a big flex on Amy Cuomo. But he did not sound like the smiley face, I just want to be mayor for everybody. He was to President Trump and all of the people who make 6, 7 figures, 8 figures in New York City, be afraid, be very afraid, and he might as well have said, "Get out," and they will.
To me, I really thought, Taylor, that the electorate changed. It changed in a way that I had not really gotten a full grasp on, even living here in New York City. And this isn't a post-COVID world, with people having moved to Texas and Florida and greener pastures that don't tax them on their income, and corporations moving as well. But what's so interesting to me, if we can go back to this full screen of this pockets of strength that Mamdani saw. Under age 30, he got 78% of the vote. He got 67%.
Yeah, under age 30, all right? Why do you think that you deserve to be in New York if you can't afford it? Why? Don't have the skills? Why don't you go someplace else and build up the skills and then move to New York after? Oh, they want the nightlife. New York doesn't even want these 30-year-olds. That's why it keeps on trying to board it out every 3 years.
He got 61% of the Asian vote, 57%.
Turning hiding spots into honey holes. Since 1957. And Iran.
Vote. 57% of the voters that he got were college educated, and he got 55% of the Black vote. So it gives you a sense of who is here, what the mix is, yes, and what their issue is. And of course, 56% said that issue was cost of living.
Yeah. So look, he's done a great job at honing in on an issue, which is affordability. The promises of all the free stuff sounds good. We'll see how the experiment turns out. I think I liked a quote this morning that every couple years we need a fun experiment in socialism to remind us who the adults really are. Let's see how this goes. I did a quick little very formal statistical survey on Instagram this morning, Jackie.
Informal polling.
Very good. And yes, all 4 of my lovely law school friends under the age of 30 are voting for him. Super excited. And that tracks. The college educated white.
Law school. Supposedly educated people. This is the reason why Trump's administration is going after the elite education. Because they produced communists.
Privileged, under the age of 30. So that is an electorate that has changed. I am excited that for one of the first times in a while, we're going to have a side-by-side comparison of the city on the hill that I love, San Francisco, who ousted London Breed, brought in Daniel Lurie, the heir of the Levi fortune, a moderate, business-friendly Democrat. Let's track San Francisco's progress with him in charge, wildly different views to what Zohran Mamdani wants to do. Let's see how these two cities go toe-to-toe with each other. Lurie has wildly different views when it comes to police, taxing businesses, mass transit. So that'll sort of give us a toe-to-toe of which city can recover and which system works.
When you think about what happened in Virginia and you think about what happened in New Jersey, Lou, as well, it was a sweep for the Democrats pretty much across the board. And so many are saying this is a referendum on Donald Trump. But when you tell me, and in those places, cost of living and affordability were also central issues, when you tell me that's the issue, I say he's only been in office for 10 months.
Yeah,
So this is a problem that predated him strongly. I'm not saying that, gaslighting or saying it's not the issue. It is the issue, but it's got such a deeper root than a Trump presidency.
Yeah, I don't think it's a referendum on President Trump whatsoever. I think it's a wake-up call for the Republicans. We've been talking about this nationally, how we just are terrible at advertising and coming up with solutions, right? We're not meeting the electorate where they're at, and that's on social media. Now, here in New York City, I think you're going to see the same things happen in Virginia as well. The social media sound bites don't really turn into great strategies and policies. His big thing is affordability. I think that's the hot button issue, but you cannot redistribute and tax what you chase away to make things affordable. And that's going to be the economic reality I think New York confronts. Capital is going to flee, both intellectual and monetary, but you're not going to be able to redistribute it to a way that he is enduring and has another term.
I'm glad you brought that up because, Brianna, then that brings me to you. We talked about young voters. He got a lot of female voters here in New York City. I was really shocked by those statistics as well. And so when you look at this, you say, he promised you all these things. He's not going to be able to deliver all those things. Your quality of life might actually go down as a result of him being in City Hall. And so what do people expect? What do they think? And when they start to see that, how do you think they're going to feel?
I don't think they're thinking, and I think the biggest problem right now is young women. I mean, look to Virginia, right? Jay Jones, someone who fantasized about murdering Republican children, had a massive margin of victory amongst women. How, as a woman, whether you're a mother or not, could you think, oh my God, this man wants to kill my future children, let me vote him in office? And we saw Republicans do a really good job in 2024 with young men ages 18 to 29. One, we have to break into that with females. And two, young men actually came out for Democrats yesterday. So I think there's another issue there, and that is Republicans need to stop all the infighting we constantly see. They need to focus on the hardcore issues that attracted young men in 2024, because if you lose those young men this next year, you're going to lose the midterms, and that's going to be a problem.
But how much of this is just an age issue, right? I mean, you talk about the adults in the room. We have to go through these experiments. I think about it like parenting, right? I have two almost adult children where you know how things are going to end sometimes. You warn them, you advise them against it, you show them the evidence, and they just have to learn by doing
the hard way.
Right? And I think that's what you saw in the stratification of the voting, that based on age, an under 45 age demographic is saying, hey, I'll give it a try. I'll give it a social experiment.
Listening to someone this morning who basically said you could read, even if they did read all of the history and all of the examples where socialism has failed, to your point, they have to experience that failure themselves.
They can't. This is the problem. Even the educated can't read. They don't know their history.
Then for the rest of the people who didn't vote for that, and almost 2 million people voted in this election locally yesterday, we also have to suffer the consequences of that learning experiment.
But as parents, you love your kids through their bad decisions. New Yorkers have to love their fellow New Yorkers through this, and we have, but more importantly, come up with solutions. We have to, right? Because what's the change? I mean,
no. You need to fight. You need to fight against communism. No, it's not like let's just play patty cake. You see a liberal? Start demonizing them.
Cry about what the result, right? Give it maybe 5 minutes, and now we have to think strategically, what can we change to make sure this doesn't happen again, right? We get another chance.
Let's
take may not be so optimistic. I think I'm a little bit more.
My optimism ended last night.
I just wanted to note that Mamdani did a press avail earlier this morning, and he said that he would keep Jessica Tisch on as
he wants her, but
as the NYPD commissioner. He also said, when asked, that he would talk to Jamie Dimon and any of the people the business leaders he talked to on the campaign trail, and he would also talk to Jonathan Greenblatt, who's head of the Anti-Defamation League. So he is talking a big game. The tone this morning is quite different than the very aggressive tone that he used last night, particularly when it came to President Trump. I won't quote some of that, but it was rough. However, when people leave New York, it benefits Florida and Texas. We talked about that, but the pension money, because we're talking about, I just wanted to say this. So the fringe benefits and pensions for city employees and retirees is $25 billion a year. About 10% at least of the pension payouts every year, it's at least a couple of $2 billion, goes to Florida, because that's where the retirees live. So our taxpayer dollars are going to Florida.
Yep. And I'm just concerned about him running a $150 billion budget, a person who's never run a budget like that before. And God forbid this city has an emergency, storms, snowstorms, you name it.
I'm going to read something that Bannon said yesterday. We're in a revolution and we have to win. If we don't, the country's gone. This is black and white. We win or they win. The threat is here in the United States. It's not foreign, it's domestic. What you saw on the stage last night in New York City was the enemy. I 100% agree with Bannon. Amazing. All right, we're going to go to MSNBC talking about tariffs. But before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the magnesium and zinc. This will boost up your immune system and help with your brain function. And vitamin C and magnesium helps with your skin, your immune system, and brain function. Taking magnesium is super important for your brain. And guess what? As part of the aftershock, you need to start taking care of your brain. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the magnesium and zinc, the vitamin C and magnesium, boost up that immune system. Take this especially during the fall and the winter. Please listen to me. And if you do this regularly, you're actually going to be slowing down the aging process.
Dealings with foreign powers, but the vehicle is imposition of taxes on Americans, and that has always been the core power of Congress. So to have the president's foreign affairs power trump that basic power for Congress seems to me to kind of at least neutralize between the two powers, the executive power and the legislative power.
Let me say two things in response to that. First, the notion that the taxes are all borne by Americans and not borne by foreign producers whose goods are imported is empirically, there's no basis for that in the record. It's actually a mix.
Well, who pays the tariffs? If a tariff is imposed on automobiles, who pays them?
Typically there'd be regardless of who the importer of record is, there'd be a contract that would go along the sort of line of transfer that would allocate the tariff.
Chief Justice John Roberts yesterday pressing the U.S. Solicitor General on the president's use of emergency powers to issue those sweeping global tariffs and asking who ultimately pays for the tariffs. The administration is arguing a 1977 law, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, gives the president the authority to impose tariffs unilaterally during declared emergencies without congressional approval. But over nearly 3 hours of oral arguments yesterday, both liberal and conservative justices appeared doubtful, skeptical at times, noting the law, which does not explicitly mention the word tariffs, has never before been used in this way. Justice Amy Coney Barrett asks, quote, "Can you point to any other place in the code or any time in history where the phrase regulate importation," which are the words used in the statute, has been used to confer tariff-imposing authority? And Justice Neil Gorsuch wondered if the court rules with Trump, what would prevent Congress from just abdicating all responsibility to regulate foreign commerce, or for that matter, declare war to the president? So, Joe, there are a couple things at play here. Do tariffs even fall under this law that the administration is using to use the tariffs? But then the bigger question, we heard this raised by almost all of the judges, mostly by Chief Justice Roberts, is what about Congress? Tariffs and taxes fall in the hands of that branch, not the executive branch. If we rule in your favor, this would alter the way, effectively, the two branches of government work.
Yeah, it was fascinating listening to the justices and where they were going with this. I think even people like Alito were saying, well, the president can impose tariffs, but possibly not through this vehicle. Possibly he's going to need another vehicle to do that. So he's doing it improperly now. I'm not saying that's how he'll rule, but that certainly seemed to be the implication. You are exactly right on Chief Justice Roberts talking, president who pays these tariffs. Americans pay these tariffs, of course. And so
The Chief Justice pushed him there, and also was very mindful of Congress's Article 1 power. He also talked about balancing that with the president's power to conduct foreign policy. But again, he's claiming an emergency based on baseball game commercials, which is, of course, absolutely ridiculous. Let's bring in MSNBC senior legal reporter and former litigator Lisa Rubin. I got to say, Lisa, the most remarkable part of that hearing was when Amy Coney Barrett had the Solicitor General on the line, and he kept trying to pull away, and she kept reeling him in, and he kept trying to pull away. He kept pulling away. She was tenacious, and finally, Justice Sotomayor, I think in an act of mercy, said, just answer her questions. You're not answering her question. We all know you can't answer her question. Just admit it, basically, is what Justice Sotomayor was saying. But, Amy Coney Barrett really yesterday was the one driving home the point that the statute does not fit the remedy that the administration is using it for.
Absolutely true. And Joe, pity the person who comes on the other side of Amy Coney Barrett, who is precise, pragmatic, and the mother of 7 children. So if anybody is well prepared for that kind of questioning, I would venture a guess it's Amy Coney Barrett. And you're right to say that she was completely fixated on the plain text of the statute. The argument that the administration is relying upon is that the words regulate importations somehow include the power to impose tariffs. But of course, not only is the word tariff not present, as Willie just mentioned.
All right. So Trump can just say no more goods, period, or only half the goods from this country. Think that's going to bode well in the economy? Probably not.
Nothing in the string of verbs there, as Justice Kagan mentioned, that gets to where John Sauer, the Solicitor General, wants to see the argument go. There's nothing in all of the things that the president can do under this Emergencies Powers Act that has anything to do with raising revenue, much less imposing taxes or duties. And that's where you get to the question of the larger constitutional issues about whose responsibilities really are these. And Justice Gorsuch is the one who was, like Justice Roberts, really focused on the question of, even if Congress, let's say for the sake of argument, wants to delegate those powers to the president, is that a line we should draw for them? And should we police their constitutional authority for them? Because if you're going to decide that they have delegated that authority in the statute, despite the lack of plain language, can they ever get that authority back? He was sort of asking John Sauer, wouldn't they have to have a veto-proof majority, essentially, to redo an interpretation of this law? If we decide that the president can tariff under this law, and Congress decides that's not what we intended at all, don't they have to survive through a veto-proof majority to get that changed? And John Sauer, really struggled with that as well.
Yeah, I'm curious. The portions of the hearing I talked about, the portions I didn't talk hear as much about were lines of questions about the administration's really specious use of the word emergency, of the term emergency. This is a president who is claiming that when he gets pissed off while he's watching the World Series because there's a commercial about Ronald Reagan, that constitutes an emergency, and the next day he can jack up tariffs on Canada. This is a president who can get angry because his political ally who tried to overthrow an election in Brazil is actually being tried. And so he gets angry at judges down there and then jacks up tariffs to 50%. That's his emergency. It has nothing to do with anything that's in this statute. I'm curious, did they press the Solicitor General on that point?
Not so hard. Justice Kagan mentioned it at one point. And I think the reason they didn't mention it, despite its appeal to just common sense, right, is that there's an easier way out of this. Justice Barrett is sort of known on the court right now for being the person who seeks a solution that as many people as possible can glom onto and that solves a problem before the court and as few steps as possible with as few repercussions as possible, really deciding the issue squarely before her and nothing more. And right now, I think the easiest way to resolve this dispute is on that plain language of what does it mean to regulate importation. If the authority that the president is seeking is nowhere in the statute to begin with, Joe, then you don't even have to have that conversation about whether or not there is an emergency, much less a conversation about how much deference is the president owed when he alone has authority under a statute to decide whether there's that emergency.
So, Steve, justices expressed some skepticism, but we don't know how they'll rule, not yet. But let's say, for the sake of argument, they do say president does not have the authority to impose these tariffs. They have to go away. What we've heard from Trump blustering, well, that will crush the American economy if that's the case. Can you tell us what will actually happen?
Well, it's going to be a big mess. First of all, we don't know how they're going to rule, but the prediction markets, for what it's worth, think there's over an 80% chance that the president's going to lose. So then you come to at least two, maybe more implications for us. One is the tariffs have been bringing in a significant amount of revenue, $200 billion in the government fiscal year that just ended, projected $300 billion in the fiscal year that just started. And so maybe nobody cares about the deficit, but that is revenue. The second question is, what do you do? Right. Does the court order that this money be refunded? You'd think that if money was taken illegally from companies or individuals, they should get it back. Mm-hmm. But unwinding that and figuring who gets what money, you can't even begin to imagine what that does. The third thing that is going to be an unbelievable mess is that Trump went off and did all these trade deals using these tariffs as his bargaining chip with the Europeans, with whomever. And so all those other countries are going to say, well, wait a minute, if you don't even have the authority to use the weapon that you were using to get us to do this deal, then we're out of here and no more deal. And you get to go start all over again. There's nothing that business hates more than uncertainty. And business has now been planning around a set of tariffs in terms of moving some production back here, doing this, that, and the other thing. And now they're going to have to figure out what to do next. It could be weeks or months before we even know what this decision is. And so he has basically taken the ball and kind of thrown it in the grandstand up, and there will be significant economic consequences of all of it.
So, Chris Matthews, given the message that you would think Republicans in Congress would have received this week, do they have a role in this? Do they perhaps act in a way that they haven't before on this and other issues, given the message that it appears they're getting from the American citizens?
You know, at a very time that people are rallying against no kings in this country, we don't need a king. We got rid of that 250 years ago, and we're celebrating that next year. No kings. And then Trump is trying to become king. If you look at this attempt to grab the authority over tariffs from the U.S. Congress, that is a king move. He wants to be the power man to decide on all taxes involving imports. He's clearly up to that. And he also is doing it with the filibuster. Everything Trump is doing is to grab more power and to become a king.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. Omega-3 will help with your cardiovascular health, bring down inflammation, and help with that lipid profile. Super important to take every day. Many people in the United States have problems with their cardiovascular health. Please take my advice and get the omega-3, bring down that inflammation, and control that lipid profile. In addition, take complete multivitamin. This complete multivitamin has the multivitamins that you need for proper enzymatic activity. These multivitamins act as cofactors to change the shape of your enzymes. Therefore, those enzymes will perform better in the cell. This is the reason why taking a multivitamin is so important. This is easy to digest. Please go to my store, get the complete multivitamin, take it every day, drink it with filtered water. And also, get the deodorants that I have. It's for males and females, and they're dual purpose. These deodorants will help with smelling good. You use it as a deodorant, but you also use it to detoxify your body. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas, extremely high quality ingredients. Please go to my store and get the citrus and the peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. Again, it's for males and females. Use it as a deodorant, but it'll also help to detoxify your body. And when you detoxify your body regularly, you're helping your immune system and your endocrine system. Please go to my store and get the deodorants. And don't smell like a crazy liberal. Amazing. Amazing. All right, let's listen into CNN.
After what happened during the election, some Dems are saying that they have a momentum and that Tuesday's election shows voters have turned on President Trump. So what might this mean for next year's midterms? Because a lot of people are shifting to that now. CNN Terry Enton here with us. I need to make sure I give you your due. Chief Data Correspondent Terry Enton. What did Tuesday's elections tell you about how important Trump will be for down ballot Republicans?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of Republicans who saw those polls that, showed Donald Trump low nationally, and they didn't necessarily believe him. But for Democrats, those polls are real, and they are spectacular. And the reason I say that is because take a look here. Voted for the Democratic nominee among Trump disapprovers. I got 2017, Trump's first term, and 2025 in New Jersey and Virginia. In 2017, among the Trump disapprovers, the Democratic nominees got 82%. In New Jersey, 87% in Virginia. Come over to this side of the screen. If there is any idea that Republicans are going to be able to outrun Donald Trump's low, this says, nah. They're going to be like impalas getting chased down in the African desert by a big lion. Look at this. 93% of Trump disapprovers voted for the Democratic nominee in New Jersey, and 92% voted for them in the great Commonwealth of Virginia. The bottom line is this. What those results on Tuesday night showed us is that Donald Trump is absolutely a drag on Republican candidates in New Jersey and Virginia, likely nationwide. If you're in a state where Donald Trump is underwater, you are in big, big trouble.
What does this mean nationally, though? Because that is what people are really going to be concentrating on now when we look forward to 2026 and the midterm.
Yeah, okay. So the big question is, what does it mean nationally, as you said, Sarah? Well, I mean, at this particular point, Donald Trump is at term 2 lows nationally in terms of his net approval rating. Look at this. These are polls that are out this week. Look at CNN. He was 26 points underwater. CBS, 18 points underwater. ABC, 18 points underwater. The NBC Hart Public Opinion Strategies poll, he was 12 points underwater. My goodness gracious, he's down there with the Titanic, and this is what is turning in for the Republican Party. That result on Tuesday night was a Titanic proportion, just absolutely awful result. New Jersey, Virginia, Pennsylvania, in terms of those judgeships, those Supreme Court judgeships, essentially, retaining those judges. All the Democratic line candidates won. Democrats won their first statewide races that weren't federal in Georgia for the first time in a generation. What we are talking about at this particular point is Donald Trump is absolutely a drag. I spoke about it on Monday. That's what we thought was going to happen, and that is exactly what did happen. Donald Trump at this point is an absolute drag on these Republican candidates. We saw it on Tuesday night, and nationally I expect that result to hold because at this point, Donald Trump is at his term 2 lows.
You're talking about the Titanic. Democrats, before this, right, were on the Titanic. Their approval ratings lower than Republicans. What does that all mean?
Okay, what does that all mean, right? I think there are a lot of Republicans saying, okay, Donald Trump ain't that popular, but the Democrats aren't popular either. And those Democratic low favor ratings, those will save us. Well, we had a test of that on Tuesday night. So what do we see here? Okay, vote for the Democratic nominee. View neither party favorably. Here's the margin. Look at this in New Jersey. If you viewed neither party favorably in New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill won that vote by 66 points. How about in Virginia? Abigail Spanberger won that vote by 56 points. It doesn't necessarily matter, it turns out, that the Democrats have viewed that unfavorably, because amongst those who like neither party, the Democrats ran away with it. I started off with a running analogy, talking about the African desert. These folks are like Usain Bolt. Despite the fact that Donald Trump despite the fact that Democrats have viewed unfavorably, Democrats are like Usain Bolt because Donald Trump is like rocket fuel. They're able to run away from the pack, and I think Usain Bolt would leave both of us in the dust.
You are also like rocket fuel, and you can just run on out of here after that good segment. See you, Harry.
See ya.
I don't think it was good for Republicans. I don't think it was good. I'm not sure it was good for anybody. But we had
an interesting evening, and we learned a lot. I thought we'd have a discussion after the press leaves about what last night represented and what we should do about it, and also about the shutdown, how that relates to last night.
My panel is back. David Chalian, I don't remember ever hearing Donald Trump even come close to eating crow. I'm not saying he ate crow, but he came closer than I've ever heard in that soundbite.
Or at least he thought the Republican senators he was talking to should be eating some crow. If he was not willing to step up to eat any, he clearly realized his party does have a problem here on the shutdown. And he was tying that, in the days before the election, he's been urging them to change the filibuster rules. And he's been seeing this shutdown as a real political problem. There is no doubt that was an overlay of what happened, but so too has been the last 10 months of Trump's second term. That also is a major overlay of what was happening and voters responding. And we ask, Dan, and we say, was Trump a factor in your vote in New Jersey and Virginia? Now, for roughly half of voters in those states, they say no, he wasn't a factor. But when he was a factor, it was 2-1 in opposition. He drove a lot of the Democratic turnout that we saw yesterday.
Yeah, Dan, your point about the way the president is accepting or deflecting blame, I think one of the biggest differences between Trump and other presidents is that he is more than happy to blame his own party as long as it's not him, right? It's not, that's why what he said about the shutdown was so remarkable, where, Democrats had a great night. If anything, they've been, handed the opportunity to dig in.
If you really dive into what he said, all right, 50% of the people didn't think that Trump was a factor in their vote. But the ones that did think it was a factor, it was 2-1. Now, what does that really mean in terms of percentages? 50% thought that their vote was due to Trump. Their feelings about Trump. 50%. Or let me rephrase it. 50% thought that Trump was a factor. But the ones that voted because Trump was a factor, which is 50%, 2-1 voted for a Democrat. If I understood him correctly. So we're talking about roughly 25%. So 75% didn't really care.
Essentially told, keep fighting. The president could, have dug in as well. But what I was hearing from sources, Republicans were like, this is going to mean that people are going to start to give. They're going to start to figure out a way out of this.
Okay, so maybe the right way to say it is that he didn't eat crow, but he served it to them.
There you go.
Dylan, nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
This isn't just about the governor's races or the mayor's race in New York or even Prop 50 in California. This went so wide and so deep, way down ballots. Virginia, the blue wave went to the State House. In Georgia, 2 seats on the Georgia Public Service Commission were flipped. 3 Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices were retained. In Connecticut, Democrats scored big municipal races and they flipped Republican seats.
Right. It was down ballot. And in those big races we were talking about, particularly for the mayoral race in New York, you also saw a record turnout that we haven't seen in decades. This was especially somewhat surprising to me just when I look at the conversations that I had with voters during the last presidential cycle, particularly younger voters. You would pick up on a certain almost malaise, like a sense of almost people giving up on the democratic system, giving up or questioning whether their votes actually amounted to something. Now, look, in many cases, the tough part now begins for these people that have run these campaigns. But I think you can still have a takeaway of whether it was the frustration with Donald Trump, the broad coalition building, or a focused message on affordability rather than the existential topics that people may not be able to digest. People resonated and they went to the ballot box. They were actually moved and motivated to cast their vote. And that was something that, based off the last election, I think particularly for the Democratic Party, was a concern.
I'm glad you mentioned young voters, and I want to drill down even more on the demographic and talk about male voters
ages 18 to 29 and look at the way that they came out, according to our exit poll, David, Mike Sherrill, 57%. Spamberger in New Jersey, Spamberger in Virginia, it was a long night, 56%. Mamdani, 68%. And then compare it to 2024 nationwide, 58% for Donald Trump.
Yeah, and again, nationwide is not these bluer places, right? So there's some of that, but I mean, Mamdani courted this cohort of young men. I think he won them by 40 points against Andrew Cuomo, again, inside that very blue territory, but it is still revealing. This is young men, Latinos. These are demographic groups that Donald Trump made gains in and empowered him to really, I mean, New Jersey was a place where he had narrowed his loss to just 6 points last year because of Latinos, young men, and the like that he made gains with. And you just saw last night, those gains were not permanent with Donald Trump not on the ballot, and after 10 months of this term, that was given back to the Democratic Party.
And in terms of the 10 months of this term, one of the factors that could be a good data point that is instructive is the question of Trump's immigration enforcement, whether it has gone too far. This is a question asked of Latino voters. 76% of Latino voters said yes in Virginia, 59% in New Jersey.
Yeah, and I think this is really telling because this issue, the issue of the border, Trump was clearly winning on, right? And Joe Biden was clearly losing on that issue. But to have this kind of a swing and to really get our first sort of sense of understanding what the optics of this are really going to mean, the sort of basic truth, it seems, in American politics, and, David, you've covered so many presidential elections, is that the electorate in general isn't really hugely comfortable on either extreme, right? And that's true in the big picture, and it's also true for these smaller issues.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the resveratrol. Resveratrol is something I've been taking for decades. This will help to soak up free radicals, help with the health of your mitochondria, boost up your energy levels, your cellular metabolism will improve. Resveratrol improves the health of the basal layer of your skin. This is the reason why you look younger when you take resveratrol. And resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression and gets rid of cells that are in senescence. Please go to my store, get the resveratrol. Resveratrol stacks great with C60, ubiquinol, NAD+, even clarity factor. Please go to my store and get the resveratrol. And another great supplement you should be taking, especially if you're 40 years of age or older, is the vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex will rev up your cellular metabolism, help your electron transport chain, which is within your mitochondria, to produce ATP. The first 4 B vitamins help that. And vitamin B complex has B12, which will help protect your neurons. And like I said, as you get older, you're going to need to protect your neurons. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the vitamin B complex and the resveratrol, help with your neurons, and slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Let's listen into Bloomberg here.
40 airports where they're talking about cutting capacity. CBS News had a list of them out earlier, and there's some very familiar places. I wouldn't want to be in Teterboro by the time that's done, but you wonder if this starts to break the back here, because that could be an area in which the blame starts to shift.
And that's certainly what did it during the last shutdown, what was previously the longest shutdown, the 35-day closure between 2018 and 2019. It was those flight delays and the staffing shortages at major airports that did it, that moved Trump to negotiate with Democrats and ultimately end the shutdown. But what we are seeing so far are both parties standing firm on this. Democrats' ask is a fairly narrow one with the ACA subsidies and extending them. but that comes with a steep price tag. In the Senate, that's more likely to get a vote. But in the House, Speaker Johnson has said no way. He doesn't want to vote on this. It is something that could really ostracize his right flank, the ultra-conservative House Freedom Caucus, for whom government spending is a top priority. And so we just keep going back and forth on this.
Well, even if Mike Johnson said, bring it, we'll go to the floor. There are questions about how this deal would work, because there was a period of time we were asking Democrats every day on the program, would you vote to open the government if you were guaranteed a floor vote on Obamacare? They all said no, because there's no trust. We're not going to just go with the promise of a vote. We want a deal. Are they starting to change their tune?
So it depends on who you talk to. Somebody like Chris Murphy from Connecticut, who has really been out there.
Right?
Yes, he's a definite no, unless they can actually extend these ACA subsidies. But then you have people like Gene Shaheen or even Tim Kaine from Virginia, who has a lot of federal workers who are going without pay in his state, who we're starting to see soften on this. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you use the word trust, and it certainly comes down to that. Senate Democrats don't trust Speaker Johnson that he would actually bring this to the floor. And Speaker Johnson said as much today. He said, no, he would not promise a vote on this. So it is, we continue to be at the stalemate. We do see some areas softening. I will say our budget reporter who's often on your program, Eric Wasson, the last time I asked him what his
What's Wasson
was,
got for us?
he says November 22nd, and he's usually an optimist on these things.
The day after the current CR expires, they need to rewrite this thing no matter what happens.
Yes.
How long does that take? Can they just change a date on this paper and sign it?
Well, certainly the Senate could change a date on the paper and sign
But
it.
the House comes back.
But the House has to come back. They've been home since September 19th, and Johnson has said he's giving them 48 hours to get back to Washington. Then you layer on, oh, by the way, flights are getting cut.
Getting on a plane, guys.
Yeah, this becomes extremely complicated to get people back to Washington.
We're going to need a congressionally chartered jet to fly around and pick everyone up. Maybe they can use AutoPen. You can't do that in Congress. So this cut of flight capacity is said to be in the name of safety, right? There have been questions about whether this is in fact an additional layer of pressure the administration is putting on under the guise of safety to get people to the table. You extend that. If you read all the tip sheets and talk to people on the Hill today, Republicans are worried that Donald Trump's going to reach out to Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer himself and cut a deal. Is that even within the realm of possibilities?
That's certainly what Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries would like.
They would.
And I do think that Trump's instinct naturally is to strike a deal. And that is why we keep seeing Jeffries and Schumer say, let us at him, let us talk to him. And they are being kept at bay. Democrats widely see Trump as Republicans' closer on this. But I do think it doesn't necessarily necessitate a meeting between, Democratic leaders and the president. Trump could just give an order to Speaker Mike Johnson, hey, hold a vote on the ACA subsidies. And that might be enough to unlock a deal. But that has not happened yet.
We got news today about Nancy Pelosi.
Yes.
Pretty remarkable, the high production values in a sort of documentary style video announcement. Is that a scary moment for Hakeem Jeffries in the middle of this standoff to have his mentor go away?
I don't think so. I think that it was widely considered likely that Nancy Pelosi would step aside or would retire at the end of this Congress. She would go out on a high note, of course, with Proposition 50, sort of her last stand, the redistricting in California. That passed widely in the state, and she was at the helm of that along with Governor Newsom. And she has, already stepped back from leadership. Jeffries has been in leadership now since 2022. So he has sort of had her guide him, the last several years. So no, I don't think that it is likely a scary moment for him. And it is a safe Democratic seat, of course.
Yes, of course. Well, she's a phone call away, and I'm sure she's not going to be a stranger to Washington. But what's she been doing? I was always kind of confused by the decision to put the gavel down, but continue as essentially a rank and file member of the House. Was it simply her love of the institution, or was she actually working behind the scenes with leadership?
I think probably a mixture of the two. She definitely was not out in front and center, and she ceded the limelight to Jeffries, who has been having regular press conferences, daily press conferences on the shutdown, and certainly led the Democratic resistance to the one big beautiful bill. But Nancy Pelosi was always kind of waiting in the shadows, ready to, strike a punch as needed. Certainly there is no better tactical politician than Pelosi. Yeah. And she was deployed throughout the last several years on that front and taking on Trump. Yes, and of course, we cannot downplay her role in the 2024 election and getting Biden to step down and Harris to run.
Boy, wow, what a legacy. How many times are we going to see the video today of her tearing up the State of the Union? That's going to be on all the news shows tonight, right? Megan, thank you.
Thank you.
When we find a path to freedom, I'm sure we'll be talking about it. She runs our Capital Influence team here in Washington, D.C., and they have been awfully busy lately trying to read the tea leaves with the government closed. We'll have more on this coming up. While we assemble our political panel, straight ahead here on Balance of Power, much more to follow. We'll speak with Congresswoman Haley Stevens from Michigan. The Democrat will bring us her view on the shutdown coming up at the top of our next hour. There's much more to follow here on Balance of Power, and it's only on Bloomberg Radio.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the drops and the lozenges for the fall and winter season. Be prepared. You never know when you contract something and you may need to mitigate it. You can get it in honey and lemon, cherry flavor, and also in blueberry. You can also get the lozenges in elderberry zinc. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off. Get a few bags for your household. Get the lozenges and the drops. And be prepared for the fall and the winter season. All right, let's listen into MSNBC demonizing Trump.
Finance the old way. Finance the rent way.
Adobe Acrobat Studio is all new. What's a PDF spaces with AI do? To the sales voice, good enough to use. Adobe Express for the 6 minutes.
Donald Trump and his bevy of MAGA Republicans are very comfortable lying to the public left and right. We all know that. But there's some lies that you just can't really get away with.
For people that don't have 401ks or are not invested in the stock market, but they've seen their grocery prices go up, inflation.
No, you're wrong. They went up under Biden. Right now, they're going down.
I mean, Trump has shown a remarkable ability over the years to convince large swaths of the American public of all sorts of things that aren't true. But there are topics where Trump's lies just aren't sticking.
A new poll finds about 70% of Americans say groceries are more expensive now than they were a year ago. And about 60% of them are blaming President Trump.
There you go. That was on Fox News. I mean, no matter how much Trump tries, his spin is no match for reality when it starts to hit Americans at home. People can tell if their groceries are getting more expensive. And I think that's an important thing to remember as we think about what we saw in elections all across the country last night. Now, don't get me wrong. There are millions of reasons. We've been talking about them throughout the course of the show, why Democrats won so many races last night. But there is one reason Trump is blaming for why Democrats did so well and why Republicans did so poorly.
I thought we'd have a discussion after the press leaves about what last night represents and what we should do about it, and also about the shutdown and how that relates to last night. I think if you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans.
Don't you love that he's announcing what the private conversations are? There's that. I mean, that was Trump speaking to Republican senators this morning, and he's right. Poll after poll has shown that the American public blame Republicans for the government shutdown. And I think that is because the shutdown is not some big abstract political thing happening in D.C. It is impacting Americans' lives in real, tangible ways that Republicans can't spin their way out of. I mean, yesterday, despite court orders from 2 different federal judges requiring the Trump administration to fund SNAP, the food stamp program nearly 42 million Americans rely on, Trump claimed he would refuse to release any funding until Democrats caved and ended the shutdown. Now, the White House has since walked back that claim, but food is still not on Americans' tables. Despite the Trump administration saying that they will partially fund SNAP benefits this month, millions of Americans still may not actually see that aid anytime soon. Because the guidance that Trump's USDA has given states for distributing those partial benefits is filled with red tape. That could mean it will take weeks before anyone can actually access those funds. And just like the Trump administration's decision to not fund SNAP in the first place, none of that is necessary. I mean, the Trump administration is choosing to make this as painful as possible. Even once that partial funding is eventually distributed, the Trump administration is actively choosing, even though they don't have to make it just 50% of what SNAP recipients are entitled to. That means the average SNAP allowance right now is just $187 per person a month. The Trump administration is choosing to make that just $93.50. Can you imagine trying to buy a month's worth of groceries with just $93? That's the reality the Trump administration is forcing upon millions of Americans right now. And that is a reality that no amount of lies can spin. President Trump is not lying about one thing, though, that this shutdown is hurting the Republican Party's popularity. That's true. So now the question is, how can Democrats use the clear message from last night's win to get Republicans to end this shutdown? Joining me now is Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. What a big blowout last night. I want to talk to you about that. But what's also happening right now is the government remains shut down, which is having a huge impact on Americans across the country. And the Washington Post is reporting there is a group of about a dozen, what they're describing as moderate Senate Democrats, considering striking a bipartisan deal to end the shutdown and fund the government if Republicans pledge to put the ACA subsidies up for a vote. I'm guessing, because I've been watching what you've been saying and watching what you've been saying online, that you don't think that's the right strategy. But tell me why.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's great to see Governor-elect Cheryl and you talking about, what a big win she had last night. This was a night where, clearly it was a referendum on Trump's corruption and chaos. But I also do think that this was an endorsement of the Democratic Party, which has been for the first time this year really showing some fight, standing up for our values and saying, listen, we're not going to sign on to a corrupt, immoral budget. People don't want the shutdown to continue any longer than is necessary, but they know who's causing it. Increasingly, people say, listen, this is Donald Trump's shutdown. All he has to do is sit down and negotiate with Democrats for a couple hours, and the shutdown could be over, because what are we asking for? It's not unreasonable. It's not earth-shattering. We're just saying, don't raise premiums on 22 million Americans by 25, 75, 150% this fall. That's what we're asking for, to get the government back open and operating, and the president could cut that deal in a matter of minutes. So yes, I think it would be very strange after the country just came out and rewarded Democrats for finally standing up and fighting for our values, to then give in to Donald Trump and cease fighting. Donald Trump said this morning he doesn't want the shutdown to continue. And so it's probably just a matter of time before he's in a discussion with Democrats about how to end the shutdown and protect people in this country from these massive healthcare increases. Maybe that's overly optimistic, but we should at least, wait a few days to find out how he's going to react to this thumping Republicans took last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's the moral thing to do, the right thing. I think I first met you when you were running on healthcare. You've been fighting on this issue for 2 decades, longer than that. It's the morally right thing, but it's also politically the right thing. If you're Trump, it's politically the right thing to make sure costs don't go up on healthcare. Do you think after the thumping last night, I love that term, and it was a clear referendum on Trump, a clear referendum in support of what the Democrats are standing for, do you think any Democrats' spines have stiffened who may have been a part of this group who were kind of contemplating folding on this?
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously been in close discussions all day today. The folks who are in that room talking to Republicans, in discussions with people like me who believe that we should continue this fight to protect people's health care. And, hopefully there, will be some fruit from those discussions in the coming days. But you are right to point out the moral consequences of reopening a government with premiums doubling for Americans. The estimates are that about 4 million Americans would lose their health care insurance. I spoke to a woman in South Florida just earlier this week, where the horror will be the worst, who is going to lose her insurance and is going to have to decide whether she or her husband gets healthcare. They both have very complicated illnesses. They are deciding which one of them is going to survive to be able to take care of their 4 kids. So shutdowns are very hard. They involve lots of pain. But if we reopen the government and 4 million Americans lose their healthcare insurance, there is enormous moral cost to that. There is pain as well. Republicans have put us in a situation where we have to choose between a shutdown where people don't get food and reopening the government in which people lose their health care. That's a false choice. But the voters told us on Tuesday night that they want us to keep this fight up on behalf of their health care. And I think that we should keep this fight going to at least see if Donald Trump is willing to come to the negotiating table.
And the Trump administration could choose to fund SNAP benefits. They have funding to do that for some period of time. They've obviously not done that fully.
It now that the slogan of my very first campaign in 1987 was, "A voice that will be heard." It was you who made those words come true. It was the faith that you had placed in me and the latitude that you had given me that enabled me to shatter the marble ceiling and be the first woman Speaker of the House, whose voice would certainly be heard. That is why I want you, my fellow San Franciscans, to be the first to know. I will not be seeking re-election to Congress.
Looking directly into the camera to make the
Good riddance.
The emotional music playing. Get ready for a whole new round of retrospectives on Nancy Pelosi, which we already saw when she decided to step down as Democratic leader and, of course, Speaker of the House. Let's start there with our political panel today because it falls against the backdrop, of course, of a government shutdown that is now into record territory. This is day 37. If you've been to the airport, you don't need me to tell you what's going on. Never mind SNAP recipients and the rest. This is starting to interfere life in America. And you wonder what Hakeem Jeffries might be able to do to end this without Nancy Pelosi leading Democrats in the House. Lisa Camuso-Miller is back with us, Republican strategist, Senior Vice President at Rock Solutions, former spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. It's great to have you, Lisa. And Christina Greer is with us as well, Associate Chair, Department of Political Science at Fordham University, our Democratic strategist. Great to have you both. Christina, what does this mean for the Democratic Conference, if not the end of an era? This is obviously not someone who was still in leadership any longer. How are you looking at this announcement?
I mean, we're looking at a great public servant, not just to the residents of San Francisco, but obviously to the body of Congress as a whole. But I do think, as sad as it is to see someone as brilliant as Nancy Pelosi retire, I mean, she comes from the D'Alessandro family from Baltimore, and they've been great public servants for generations. I do think that there's a window for optimism and a passing of the baton. I think, I'm in New York City, and so obviously the Democrats just had a major win with a very young rising star in Mamdani. I think a lot of Democrats want new leadership. They want excitement. They want people to sort of be a 21st century politician for them. And, there are already 2 candidates that have said they're going to run for Nancy Pelosi's seat. So I think that there could be a real opportunity for a lot of Democrats to feel like this could be a changing of the guard with new and fresh ideas on an old foundation that many Democrats, such as Nancy Pelosi, have put forth.
Lisa, you, of course, work for a Republican speaker, but are you seeing this as a changing of the guard? She's obviously not in leadership any longer. She had been essentially a rank-and-file Democrat in the United States House. This is the Hakeem Jeffries era, is it not?
Oh, yeah, for sure. But you have to believe that the legacy of Nancy Pelosi will long live on. I mean, she has been and set remarkable markers for everyone that will come after her in terms of successes as it relates to securing the majority, to message discipline, to all of the legacies that she leaves behind. People over and over again, and by people I mean elected officials and those in the House and around the country, have underestimated the power that she really holds and the remarkable amount of talent and direction that she has provided for this conference. So I have to believe that they will miss her being there, and I hope that they take a lot of lessons from what it is she has taught them in terms of how to get back into the place where they are in the majority again.
Christina, is there a move that Nancy Pelosi would have made in this standoff with a government shutdown involved in the extension of health care subsidies that come from the ACA that Hakeem Jeffries maybe has not considered yet? Is there a style difference that would have kept us out of this mess?
I mean, that's hard to say. You know, I wonder if Nancy Pelosi would have been able to caucus differently so we wouldn't even get to a shutdown. I mean,
That's right.
You know, prospecting that I don't know. But, you know, I think obviously Hakeem Jeffries still relies on the wisdom of Nancy Pelosi, and much of his foundation is watching her.
Hakeem Jeffries is an idiot.
And, you know, caucus and get the ACA across the finish line. I think that this is a really hard, challenging time for not just Democrats, but Republicans as well. We're talking about short-term pain versus long-term, you know, travesties for the American people. And the Democrats are trying to hold the line, but obviously, you know, pocketbook issues are real. Thanksgiving is around the corner. There's so many families that were struggling before the shutdown because of DOGE, because of layoffs and furloughs.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah.
So I don't.
Fordham University, Associate Chair, Department of Politics. I went to Fordham, you know, for my pre-med. And, you know, classic example of a fucking liberal. All right, here's the problem with Jeffries. He doesn't have the smarts like Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, even though I was totally against her politics, she was a great strategist. She knew game theory. All right? Jeffries is just a dipshit. No strategy. Not smart enough.
Appreciation for each other and the way we have gone about our work. He's leaving because of violence and political threats against his family. What does that tell us about the state of politics in the Capitol?
Well, Joe, I think it is reflective of the moment that we are in. And I think that it is the kind of cautionary tale that we, as those who work in the political world, but also those who take the leap of faith and the leap of confidence to run for office, that if we are not more careful and that if we continue down this violent trajectory, we are going to have less quality candidates and candidates that are willing to work and do the courageous work that it takes to be an elected official.
She's not answering the question properly. The problem that is happening is that the people that are voting are realizing that their representatives in government are not paying attention to them, and they're captured by special interests, big donors, lobbying groups, PACs, and they're not listening to the average citizen that they represent. And because of that, there's an anger that is starting to emerge. There will be a time in the United States, if our representatives do not pay attention to the people, where there is a very high probability that there will be a similarity to the French Revolution in modern day. And that means extreme violence to reboot the government, because Congress isn't listening to the will of the people. And they're paying attention to the special interests. Now, Plato did say that this was going to happen and it'll lead to tyranny. And just look at what's happening in France. It's a basket case. They've been having a French Revolution every 50 years, right? They don't have a stable government. But it's because they don't have true representation of its people. We used to have true representation, but we have Congress doesn't pay attention to the people. That's on the Republican side and the Democratic side. So this, we're going to have bad quality candidates. Why don't you just stop? You got to get the special interest money machine out of the way. You have to abolish that. So there's true representation that's happening in Congress. Think about the argument that the Democratic Party has right now. Think about it. They want to keep on continuing Obamacare, even though it's supposed to sunset. All right. And every time that it's about to be abolished, they go, well, it's going to raise premiums by X percent. Well, yeah, that will always be the case every time you decide to cancel the program. So what they're basically effectively saying is that we don't want to cancel the program. They need to come, it needs to come to a head and just cancel the program and stop it. No, they just, they go, well, if you take it away, it's going to raise the premium. So what? So what? So what? Just let it.
I get some people that want to really negotiate in good faith, but we've seen so many Republican senators recognize that they've been in office for several years, several terms, and they just cannot deliver for their constituents the way they once did because of the shadow of the dangers that can be unleashed on them by someone from their own party.
The shadow of the dangers that could be unleashed upon them. This is the conversation we're having in November of 2025. Great panel today. Christina, thank you. Lisa, of course, thank you. They'll be back in our second hour here on Balance of Power as we anticipate.
But the reason is because they're not listening to their constituents. Now, people would say, well, why would you want to raise the premiums for these people that are on Obamacare? Well, the will of the people, they're tired of Congress overspending. We can't afford it anymore. So you just got to cut the programs. Cut, 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 cut. Get that deficit and get the debt down. Cut, 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 cut. Not add, cut, 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 cut.
White House event about the GLP-1 drugs and pricing, pharmaceutical pricing in this country is going to resume. During the Most Favored Nations Oval Office announcement, we have learned a representative, as I mentioned to you, with one of the companies fainted. The medical unit of the White House quickly jumped into action. That gentleman is okay. We're still trying to identify who that was and exactly what happened, but the president should be back in the Oval at some point while we're still.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ashwagandha root. This will help to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. Turmeric brings down inflammation and soaks up free radicals. Really important for your immune system and cardiovascular system and brain function. Lignans helps your immune system and endocrine system. Brings down inflammation and soaks up free radicals. Stack these together, and it's a powerful stack to slow down the aging process. Because if you bring down inflammation and you control your blood glucose levels and your cortisol levels, voila, you are slowing down the aging process. Please go to my store and get the lignans, the turmeric, and the ashwagandha. It's a very powerful stack. All right, let's take a look at what else is going on.
Nearly 10,000 people turning out for Turning Point USA's stop at Auburn University last night, honoring Charlie Kirk and the promise to keep his legacy going.
Life in the public eye is one of the challenges Erica Kirk spoke about in an exclusive interview with Jesse Waters.
Charlie and I were always very big on, and this was a philosophy he lived by, you protect what you love. We live in a world where children don't even have a childhood anymore.
I don't trust people that look like they're fake tears, and I don't trust people that have a lot of gaudy earrings or rings on their fingers. There's something odd about her. Something odd.
Why are you posting a photo of your kids so that you can get $50 off a stroller? Like, that does not make sense to me. And our babies are not for anyone else's viewing other than ours and our family. And why would I want AI images of my children out there? Why would I want, and yeah, we get kidnapping threats, we always have. We get death threats. We always have. You're just smart about it. Protect what you love.
There's something
Protect
wrong.
who you love.
There's something odd about her.
Fox News contributor Brett Cooper joins us now. Brett has 9 million followers across her social media platforms. She's a rock star, went to UCLA and was involved in Turning Point there. So what are your takeaways when you watched that interview last night with Erica?
I'm just so impressed with her and her drive to continue Charlie's legacy. I mean, she has been handed an almost impossible task because Turning Point was Charlie and Charlie was Turning Point. And, you know, there are so many times that he could have taken a step back. He could have phoned it in, and he never did because he knew how important he was to the organization, to the students, to the brand, to, you know, everybody who donated money. And so now she has to take that on. And there's so many young people who are...
No, I can't deal with her. I'm just going to skip that one. Let's see what Glenn Beck has to say.
I want to start with the analysis from Van Jones on the Mamdani speech last night. Listen to what he said.
I think the Mamdani that we saw on the campaign trail, who was a lot more calm, who was a lot warmer, who was a lot more embracing, was not present in that speech. And I think that Mamdani is the one you need to hear from tonight. There are a lot of people trying to figure out, can I get on this train with him or not? Is he going to include me? Is he going to be more of a class warrior even in office? I think he missed a chance tonight to open up and bring more people into the tent. I think his tone was sharp. I think he was using the microphone in a way that he was almost yelling. And that's not the Mamdani that we've seen on TikTok and the great interviews and stuff like that. So I felt like there's a little bit of a character switch here, where the warm, open, embracing guy that's close to working people was not on stage tonight. There was some other voice on stage.
That's how communism always is. Always. Smiley face, everything's going to be great, and then all of a sudden tyranny. And Van Jones should know better. Oh. Wait a minute. He kept on pushing buttons and convinced Jeff Bezos that Jeff Bezos had white privilege because he was so wealthy and had to write a $1 million check to Van Jones because Van Jones is such a black intellectual.
It's almost like a mask has come off. What a surprise.
Yeah, by the way,
Now-
just quick recommendation for anyone in New York. If Mamdani tries to get you on a train, don't go. I think it's a terrible idea. Stay away from the Mamdani
Very good
train.
point, Stu. I might have even gotten onto that train, without realizing. Very good point. Very good.
I don't think
point.
it's a German
No
you'll be
train.
invited, but
No trains. No trains. Okay, so here's Mamdani, and this is how angry. Listen how angry he is when he's talking about Donald Trump. Listen to this.
So Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
What? It gets curled up on the TV.
We will hold that landlords to...
The people that voted for Mamdani, suicidal empathy. That's exactly what happened. And it's going to destroy the city. Look at that. And then you got wealthy people trying to wait, he's a problem, but we better be on his good side. So we'll try to help him. No, the business community should say, hell no, we're going to hold the line and we're going to push back. No, business community's not doing that.
Counts because the Donald Trumps of our city have grown far too comfortable taking advantage of their tenants.
he's screaming. I don't think he need to turn
We
the
will
volume
put
up.
an end
into the culture of corruption that has allowed billionaires like Trump to evade taxation and exploit tax breaks.
Not corruption. Change the tax laws.
We will stand alongside unions and expand labor protections because we know, just as Donald Trump does, that when working people have ironclad rights, the bosses who seek to extort them become very small indeed. New York will remain a city of immigrants, a city built by immigrants, powered by immigrants.
As long as they're legal. You know, being here illegally is illegal.
And as of tonight, led by an immigrant.
A very angry immigrant whose own mother says he doesn't identify as an American. I mean, I can I just spend a minute on this? Because he's absolutely right. New York was built by immigrants. America was built by immigrants. I mean, unless you're a Native American, you're an immigrant. Okay, and I make the case that...
Hey, Glenn, there were a lot of people that were American that built America too, not just an immigrant. You know, you could have been born here and you weren't an immigrant, and you could have helped build a nation, fight for the country. Not everybody was an immigrant that helped build the nation. Well, then people would say, well, if they're from Europe, then everybody's an immigrant if you go back far enough. Well, if you go back far enough, everyone's from Africa.
Come from Asia, even if you're an American, native. You know, go back far enough, you weren't on this continent. So I agree, all built by immigrants. But we have a difference now of immigrants. Listen to this from Teddy Roosevelt. There is no room in this country for hyphenated Americanism.
Right, exactly.
When I refer to hyphenated Americans, I don't refer to naturalized Americans. Some of the very best Americans I've ever known were naturalized Americans, Americans born abroad. But a hyphenated American is not an American at all. This is just as true of a man who puts native before the hyphen as a man who puts German or Irish or English or French before the hyphen. Americanism is a matter of the spirit and the soul. Our allegiance must be purely to the United States. We must unsparingly condemn any man who holds any other allegiance. Think about this. Think about this in what's happening with the Somali communities. Think about Minnesota. Think about Dearborn. Think about New York. Think about what's being said about and to immigrants today. If he is heartily and singly loyal to this republic, then no matter where he was born, he is just as good as an American as anyone else. The one absolute certain way of bringing this nation to ruin, of preventing all possibility of its continuing to be a nation at all, would be to permit it to become a tangle of squabbling nationalities. An intricate knot of German Americans, Irish Americans, English Americans, French Americans, Scandinavian Americans, Italian Americans. Notice, by the way, he's not attacking people of color. These are all people from Western Europe. So this isn't something new, and it's not about racism. Scandinavian, yeah, boy, you must hate white people. Those are the whitest white people on the planet, for the love of Pete. The men who do not become Americans and nothing else are hyphenated Americans, and there ought to be no room for them in this country. The man who calls himself an American citizen and yet who shows by his actions that he's primarily the citizen in the life of our body politic, he has no place here, and the sooner he returns to the land in which he feels his real heart allegiance, the better it'll be for every good American. There's no such thing as a hyphenated American who's a good American. The only man who's a good American is the man who is an American and nothing else. I mean, when he said that in the early 1900s, he was talking about a whole different class of immigrants. race-wise, but it doesn't matter. Hyphenated American, race. If you are an American, you don't see race. People have in the past, and it's been wrong to do it. And you know who really saw that clearer than anyone else? The progressives. Margaret Sanger being one of them. The progressive movement. They're the ones who wanted to separate races. For the love of Pete. So he's now angry, and he's jamming a wedge between Americans and immigrant Americans. Listen to the next cut here.
As has so often occurred, the billionaire class has sought to convince those making $30 an hour that their enemies are those earning $20 an hour. They want the people
stop for a second. Dude, can you explain that? Play that again. Explain this sentence to me.
The billionaire class has sought to convince those making $30 an hour that their enemies are those earning $20 an hour.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
I mean, the case is that the Republican Party, the evil rich people, billionaires, yeah, are trying to convince everybody that the problem in our country are the poor people.
So exactly the opposite of what he's doing. He's trying to convince the people who are $20 hour laborers that the 32 billionaire class is their problem, is their enemy.
No, very true. You might find some hypocrisy.
Right. He's trying to put a wedge in where the poor are going to battle the middle class and the rich. That's the issue. And what's basically the bulk of the United States? The bulk of the United States is the middle class, not the poor, not the rich. Where's the wealth? Where's most of the wealth? And where's most of the taxation? It's in the United States. It's primarily in the middle class. For taxation, let's put it that way, for taxation.
Go ahead, play the rest, please.
They want the people to fight amongst ourselves so that we remain distracted from the work of remaking a long broken system. We refuse to let them dictate the rules of the game anymore. They can play by the same rules as the rest of us.
Yeah, amen. I'm all for that.
Together, we will usher in a generation of change. And if we embrace this brave new course, rather than fleeing from it, we can respond to oligarchy and authoritarianism with the strength it fears, not the appeasement it craves.
Now he goes on the very next sentence, which we didn't grab. After all, if anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it's the city that gave rise to him. If there is any way to terrify a despot, it's by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power. How did Donald Trump accumulate power? How do you do that?
He built
capitalism. Capitalism. He accumulated power by making money, by creating businesses, by building, New York. A lot of New York was built by Donald Trump. So that's how he accumulated power. So what he's saying here, you want to talk about the mask coming off, what he's saying here is we have to now dismantle that system of capitalism because that's what gave him power. One last cut, 47, please.
After all, if anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him. If there is any way to terrify a despot, It is by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power.
He's so obsessed with this guy.
This is not only how we stop Trump, it's how we stop the next one.
It's amazing. It's going to be interesting to watch New York City over the next 4 years. Very, very interesting, because he's going to be pushed by the left. They are going to demand that he does these things, and he wants to do them. So let's see what he gets done and how many great changes are coming to that city.
Oh boy. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. You can get it in extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, MCT coconut oil. You get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce if you buy the higher ounce configuration. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Now, by taking C60, especially on an empty stomach, teaspoon a day, every day, you're going to soak up free radicals. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. And by soaking up free radicals, you're reducing stress on your cells. You're allowing your mitochondria to perform better, and you'll have more energy. And your tissues and your organ systems will perform better, including your immune system, your endocrine system, your brain function. And C60 will also help to soak up those free radicals at the vascular level and reduce the chances of plaque formation. Taking C60 every day, you will notice within 2 months the effects where your body is starting to heal and getting and performing better. Within 1 year, you're going to notice a physical difference between the way you look before you start taking C60 and a year later. And you're going to look younger. You're going to look younger 1 year later. Take a teaspoon a day every day, and C60 helps the basal layer of your skin and allows for the cells that generate new skin cells to be healthier, have less stress, have less free radicals, and therefore those basal cells will be healthier. But like I said, by taking it every day, you're helping your immune system, your endocrine system, your skin, and your other organ systems. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take a teaspoon a day. Now, yes, it is a little expensive, but it's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. You can't absorb enough vitamin C to even equal anywhere close to what this is. All right? There's nothing better in terms of soaking up free radicals. This is why it's so important as part of your anti-aging protocol to have this. Please go to my store, make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off. But take it every day, a teaspoon a day. And you'll notice that your body is healing. And what is also really important to realize is if you take it before a workout, you're soaking up the free radicals that you're generating during your workout. And you'll recover quicker. And you'll have better performance. So please go to my store and get the C60. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. Click the link, go to my website, get the great products that I offer. Share the links, ask your social media to follow me. And if you like the videos that I do, please help support the work by purchasing the products. And if you would like, you can donate on Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee on my website. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.